So it's 3, 2, 1.
It's the most terrible clap of my life. Okay.
In theory, it'll work. It might not, but hey, you never
In,
know.
in theory. In theory. Okay. Well, yeah. So let's do a really awful intro. Hi guys, welcome to the PulsarFire Paddock podcast. With myself, Mr. Pro Dragonfire, and also
Mr. Pulsar Man, good evening.
here we go. Um, so this is basically going to be a bit of a series, I think. Just armchair chit chat about basically anything motorsports. Whatever comes to mind, because obviously we've got our sim racing chads that are now in the real world, Jimmy Broadbent and Mr. Super GT. Don't know if you've seen those guys. I'll come on to those. They're actually doing wonders. I always like to start on home ground, so I was actually going to lead us into some touring car kind of chit chat, because they have just announced their new calendar for next year. I don't know if you've seen the provisional calendar for next year.
I have not seen next year's calendar. Hang on, I shall do Googling.
Yeah, it's I'll say it's largely much the same as basically this year's calendar. It's pretty similar,
Wow.
apart from obviously they're hoping that none of the races will be affected by this this pandemic thing.
It's not like there's really anywhere else you can go. I mean, apart from Rockingham, which is mostly now car storage and houses, where there isn't really anything else in the country you can go to.
It's a shame, isn't it? Really.
Oh, it is.
Fair.
It really is.
Rockingham was a great venue. It even hosted. What did it host? It hosted the European NASCAR,
Yeah.
which that has the for some reason Jack Villeneuve races in that, and I still don't know why, but he does.
Well, there are people out there that like going really, really, really fast and just turning left. I don't understand it personally, and I know I've probably just pissed off our entire American audience, or two of them. Hi, but I've never understood the appeal in going round and round in circles. I like the technical challenge of a track, but Rockingham had a track infield as well. Might not have been the best or most technical track in the world, but it was all right.
It was good. I mean, it certainly provided some entertaining like BTCC races. There's also some big accidents there, if I remember correctly, because didn't they have to swoop off the oval into a hairpin turn?
They did,
There was there was some great crashes down there. I don't. Can you call an accident great in this like safety era? I don't know, but
Yeah, fuck it.
Yeah.
Of course you can. Yeah, by the way, there'll be swearing in this podcast. Or it depends if Pro Dragonfire decides to beep it out. I'll leave that to him. But yeah, of course you can call a crash great. There's still people out there that watch for a crash. And let's face it, I don't think I've ever watched a BTCC weekend without some kind of a massive crash or off somewhere.
No, this is true. I think that's actually part of the allure of touring cars, to be fair. Because, not being funny, but when you've got Matt Neal and Jason Plato going wheel to wheel, you can guarantee they're going to be smashing the hell out of each other there.
And we know it's popular because if you look at any intro to any BTCC program, when it was on the BBC, when it moved to ITV or what have you, the sort of the clips that they would roll before they actually started talking was always a crash. There was always James Thompson's crash at Donington in there. There was always Giovinazzi rolling his Alfa Romeo. That was the appeal. That was the allure.
Yeah. To be honest, that aspect of BTCC hasn't changed even now.
No.
Although I will say what has changed with BTCC is I was watching the races at Brands Hatch Indy just gone, and down the side on the graphics now they actually now list who's an independent driver and who's a manufacturer. And out of the top 15 drivers on the grid, the top 12 were all independents, and the manufacturers were running way down the order. I think we've lost that manufacturer era, it would seem.
But you know what? We say we've lost it. That was 20 years ago, and
oh god, yeah.
You know, if you think back to the Super Touring era, where you had Nissan, Ford, Vauxhall, Peugeot, Renault, all fielding two cars. I mean, Renault, for fuck's sake, were partnered with Williams F1 team to make their car as good as they possibly could. I mean, those
Yes.
were some amazing cars and some amazing races. But that all died in 2001, and then Vauxhall were the only manufacturer to stay, and they then became the Team Egg cars and this, that, and the other when Egg Bank was a thing. But at that point, they weren't really manufacturers in my eyes. Well, I say Vauxhall were the only one to stay. Steve Soper was still driving a light, bright yellow 406 coupe for a Peugeot works team for a little while because he had a career-ending accident at Brands Hatch, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Actually, do you know what that I always remember that Peugeot more from the Tocker Race Driver game. It was set around that time because, in fairness, the colour of that was that. It almost was the same as the year 2000 Minardi from Formula One. That bright fluorescent thing.
Yeah, it was highlighter yellow.
Yeah, and it wasn't a particularly beautiful car. No. It didn't carry it well.
No, it did not, and it didn't perform very well either. But also,
shocking.
Didn't MG still have a car around about that time? I'm sure MG were putting in. Was it the ZT? Whatever the Rover 400 was.
Wasn't that when Colin Turkington first came in? Because he was running for MG, wasn't he, as like one of his first rides?
I think he might have been. I'm just looking. I've just found a picture in front of me of the MG because it was that sort of green and grey MG colours that they were using at the time.
Yes.
Right before they went bust.
There was an awful Alfa Romeo 147 as well.
The least reliable car in history.
Yes, and needless to say, it didn't do much more in British touring cars. I just remember it limping around in last place the majority of the times it was on camera.
Yeah. Here we go. So it wasn't the ZT, it was the ZS, which was whatever the Rover 400 version was. Which, in fairness, and this is something that really fucking bugs me, the MG ZS Rover 400, whatever you want to call it, was a 4-door saloon. This is all about British Touring Car Championship. It used to be the British Saloon Car Championship. People forget that because it's all fucking hatchbacks now.
Yes.
And that's not really a touring car to me. But notable drivers, in fairness, it's a decent list. So there's a couple of people I've never heard of, but Rob Collard, Anthony Reid, and Colin Turkington.
Anthony Reid, God, that is a name. See, Colin Turkington, I told you, and look at the success he's gone on to have. He's had a great career.
Well, he's going to go down as one of the best touring car drivers of all time, surely.
Why, has he got the record now for titles? Is he the most successful driver in terms of titles?
Oh, he might be.
He's up there, because I'm sure, did he not win another title? I'm sure he's up there. I mean, Rob Collard's gone on. I don't know if you've noticed, Rob Collard, and the only reason I know this is because he appeared in the ACC update, but he's been racing in the GT World Series. Didn't realise he'd made the transition across to endurance racing. Okay,
well, I mean, it sort of makes sense because his sons do endurance racing, don't they?
Yes, I think. I don't know if they're at the same team. I think they might have been rivals. I'm sure they're in rival cars.
So I could have sworn, is it Ricky Collard? I thought Ricky Collard and Rob Collard had driven together in the same car.
They may have done. I know Andy Prio has with his son Sebastian, because they ran a Ford Mustang last year. That was quite interesting. They were quite successful together as well. Here we go. Colin Turkington. So.
Oh, you're looking up championship wins?
I was looking at his championship wins.
So I can give you the number because I've already done it.
Go on.
He is joint first for the most amount of drivers' championships with 4. Wow. He is joint with someone else who I'll give you the name because I think we could be guessing for ages because there's been so many legendary touring car drivers. But he's the godfather of the modern age of touring cars as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Andy Rouse.
Andy Rouse, yes. There was some great footage, and I remember Murray Walker commentating, especially on his kind of era. Oh, there's some cracking. Wasn't that and Cleland was behind, and Murray was like, and he's going for first.
Oh yeah, Rousey was involved in that. But the thing is, I mean, Rousey won his first championship in '75 and his last one in '85. But the fact that he's only won 4 titles, I think, belies the fact that if he wasn't winning, a car that he had developed or worked on was winning instead. Because all those Cozzies, all those Sierra IS 500s, were all Andy Rouse specials.
Wow, that's quite impressive.
Yeah, man's a legend. Absolute legend.
Well, yeah, definitely so. What did you find out on Collard? Was it his son, or are they not related?
Well, I know Ricky Collard is his son.
Okay.
What I can't find out is whether they have definitely raced together. And hey, I'm sure someone in the comments will let us know and tell us that we're being idiots. But I was fairly sure they had.
They may well have done. I mean, I've just looked at Ricky Collard. So last year, do you know what? Ricky Collard didn't race in that many events last year.
No, he didn't.
What's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 races in total last year.
Hmm.
Barwell Motorsport. I'm pretty sure that's who Rob Collard was running with. So maybe they have.
Maybe.
But what I will say is that obviously what people do forget is that Ricky Collard finished as the runner-up in the MSA Formula Championship to one and only Lando Norris.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, people do forget, just because he's the son of a famous racing driver, people think he's just got there off the back of his dad's coattails. It's not always the case. He's there on merit.
Yeah, this is true. This is very true. I mean,
So, I'm going to answer our previous question. Barwell Motorsport, Lamborghini Huracan GT3 Evo, car number 77, driven by Rob Collard and Ricky Collard, with Sandy Mitchell and Leo Machitsky, who I don't know.
Oh, don't know the last one.
No.
No, yeah, okay. But still, there you go. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, well, the only other father-son duo I particularly know about, and I don't know when the last time they drove together was, but of course Martin and Alex Brundle. They've done a few. I'm sure they've done some Le Mans entries together.
I'm sure they did. I mean, I can't remember the last time. Didn't they do? There was one pretty recently because I remember Sky F1 doing a thing on it. The 24 hours of the Nordschleifer. I'm sure he raced with his son in that. In an Aston Martin GT4. I'm sure they were together in that.
Yeah, he might have done. I mean, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
No.
So, I mean, I know this conversation will get to F1 at some point because we are both F1 fans. But when you watch the F1 weekend and you hear Martin Brundle commentate on the qualifying and the F1 race, and then you hear Alex Brundle commentating on the Junior Series, it just sounds like a mini Martin. It's amazing.
It does, yeah, it does. 2016, that was when they last raced together.
Oh, God, was it that long ago?
It was that long ago already. That's 5 years ago now.
Yeah.
And they finished second place together, which is not bad.
No, you're not going to knock that, are you?
No, that's pretty good. Yeah, Martin's not done anything since. So his kind of racing days are done. I mean, he's got his commentary career, so
yeah. I mean, let's face it, he's not short of a bob or two, and actually, see, you've got to love Google for this sort of stuff. Martin Brundle, how old is the chap? He's got to be 63 or so, 62.
Yeah.
So do you know what? 62 years old. I can't imagine being running around racing like I would have been when I was 20 or 30.
No, but yeah. You look at him, and he's able to just jump into any F1 car he's given the chance to, and he can still drive it relatively bloody well. What was it Vettel said to him? Because he had to go in a Ferrari at their test track, and Vettel literally asked the question. He was like, "Is he 60 something like that?" He's like, "Oh, I wish I'm still being able to pick up F1 cars and race when I'm his age." He's got a good point. I mean, not everyone can do what he does, and I know he's got people who don't like him as well. But
you always do when you're in the public eye. There'll be people who like you and people that hate you. It's just sort of the nature of the beast, isn't it? But I think, and I know you and I both have some very strong opinions on this, around pay drivers and people who are in a racing seat
Oh.
that perhaps don't deserve to be there. Rags, I'm looking at you, mate. But generally speaking, if you think there's 20 cars on a Formula One starting lineup, those should be the 20 best drivers in the world at that point. So just because Martin Brundle didn't win a title or didn't win a world championship, there was still a period of time for a number of years where he was voted as one of the best 20 drivers in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And when he was given the chance, he was able to show that. I mean, it's like almost like Johnny Herbert. They both had accidents that damaged their ankles, and you just think with how good they both were at the time when, after injury, they still were capable of being at the sharp end, picking up podiums. If they hadn't had the injuries, where would they have been? It's always an interesting one. Always quite a...
It is.
Yeah, what
it's
if?
there's so many what ifs that you could ask in that. But, if this sounds like a really strange thing to say, but if you step down from F1 to a slightly slower world, like the 24 Hours of Le Mans, perhaps, which is slightly slower than F1, but let's face it, not by much. Don't forget, Johnny Herbert won the 24 Hours of Le Mans in the Mazda 787B back in '91.
Yes, he did. And let's not forget as well, Martin also won Le Mans in the legendary and beautiful beautiful livery. It's always one that stands out. The silk cut Jaguar.
Oh yes, yeah. What was that? Was it the XJ19? What did they call that thing?
I think it was the XJR9. Was that the XJR9?
Yeah, that sounds about right. But that was back in the day, and this is me showing my age and being a miserable old man now. FYI, anyone listening to this podcast, you'll hear that a lot from me. But that was back in the day when they were proper prototypes. They looked different and they were pushing the envelope and they had proper engines in them, none of this electric nonsense. They were just amazing cars. Yeah.
I mean...
Oh, hang on.
Yeah.
The XJR9LM is not what he won in, though. It was the XJR12, which was a slightly updated version of it.
Yeah, didn't they bring extra? It was. I've got to say, it looked like it was on the verge of flouting the sort of ground effect rules. So I'm looking at the car and it's got the side skirting on it. The rear wheels are enclosed. Really groundbreaking. I mean, we don't get cars like that anymore. Even with this new hypercar era that they've kind of brought in. Yeah. But then at some tracks, the hypercar is slower than the LMP2 class, which is kind of a bit like, okay, that's a bit worrying.
That's not how it should work.
No, yeah. I want the top class should be the top class. It should be the one that's pushing the boundaries, but...
Well, so looking at it, I hadn't necessarily appreciated this at the time, but looking at the XJR12 Jag and the XJR9LM, they're Group C cars. So, Le Mans was part of Group C, and that's fine. But Group C, sort of the same as Group B rallying was, really defined that era and pushed technical developments for cars in a very specific direction, to the point where people argued they were too fast and it was unsustainable due to cost, and we had to pull it back for danger and financial reasons. So, where would we be having not had Group C? And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that really lament and miss it and wish it was still a thing.
Well, yeah, and that kind of also harks to the going back to touring cars, like the super touring era.
Yeah,
the costs were spiraling.
Oh yeah.
Well, Renault, they were spending something ridiculous on their car, weren't they? Some millions and millions of pounds.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact figure, but they once quoted that they were spending millions. And this is back in the day when touring cars was about people pulling a Mini out the back of a truck, or that they towed up from their home down south, and they'd spent a couple of weekends building it up and getting it ready to go racing. It wasn't that much of a stretch from that era. But yeah, and I remember, so I have read Jason Plato's autobiography. I'm not a big fan of autobiographies as a rule, but Plato's was a good yarn. I enjoyed reading that. And he talked about how the teams would turn up in their huge motorhomes, and there'd be, you know, pit girls and grid girls, and there'd be PR everywhere, and whole PR teams dedicated just to keeping this part of the team running. And he can remember 10, maybe 15 years before that, it was just guys in caravans popping up. You know, it was just worlds apart.
Yeah, complete transformation. Because there's rules and regulations now around motorhomes. Don't know if you saw all this rule change get. I don't know why it's part of the rules, but it is. But for all variations of motorsport, the teams have to have a motorhome within a certain size limit now, because because they were getting too extravagant. I find that incredible,
Oh my
incredible to
God.
think. Yeah,
Some
how bizarre.
Someone should have a word with the F1 paddock. I'm sure they'd love that.
Well, you see, this is it. So the ruling came into place because of F1. That's why it's in place. So like you can't now go more than 3 stories in height. You know, because teams were building basically a fucking tower in the back of the paddock. You know, I mean, you saw the size, like for instance, the McLaren motorhome that was fucking fully automatic sliding doors and all this bollocks. I mean, it's like basically a mobile hotel, essentially.
Well, but this is something I've always struggled with, because I've never understood the need for certain extravagance and frivolies with this sort of stuff. I mean, the McLaren Centre in Woking is a really beautiful, really ornate building, but it would have cost millions to design, and that's probably just what they paid the pissing architect to design the thing, let alone putting down the bricks and mortar. Was that best use of their money? I mean, let's face it, they've effectively mortgaged it at the moment. They've sold it off and released the equity from it in order to keep themselves afloat. And do you think, was that the right thing to do?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, because I mean that uh, I guess that because that was built in a different era, but now
Hmm.
obviously in the era of cost cutting, I think teams that have gone to these extravagant levels are really going to struggle to hem that sort of cost reduction in now, because they've obviously got bigger venues than anyone else,
Hmm.
more expensive facilities. They've got their own. What McLaren got their own wind tunnel, haven't they? Built in underground.
Yes, they do.
Because that's what the lake is for, to cool the wind tunnel.
Is it
Yes,
really?
that is what it's for. It's the cooler. Yeah, that is the water that they pump through the system to cool down the wind tunnel when it's in use.
Amazing. I'd always just assumed it was a an aesthetic choice to make it look pretty. I didn't realise it served a functional purpose.
Oh no, there's a genuine functional purpose to it. So all of the cooling in their building they use the lake to basically like pump through the system, and it provides all the cooling. It's a remarkable like feat of engineering, but uh, like the situation they find themselves in now. I mean, obviously the results have improved, but
They have.
it's worrying on the cost front if they've got to scale down, and you know,
Well, didn't they? I'm sure they've actually sold some of their cars, and didn't Williams did something very similar last year as well.
mm,
And it's all been done in a fairly underhanded and odd way, in that they've
yeah,
sold them, but they still remain where they are, but they're actually owned by someone else, and they're sort of leased back to McLaren. Yeah, it's
it's kind of
all.
hollow, isn't it? It's very. Ugh.
Well, it all feels very much like a multi-million company payday loan. You know, it's like the APR will be
Yeah,
7,429%. But don't worry, you can still keep living where you are. You can still keep your cars. We'll just own them and take them off you in 4 years' time when you can't afford the repayments.
yeah. I just wouldn't want to go down that route.
No.
Oh, it's worrying, very worrying. And of course, I mean, we'll probably come more into F1 in full a bit later, but obviously they also lost what's his face, the one of the owners, that
Oh,
obviously he didn't get along with Ron Dennis towards the sort of latter part of his tenure.
so I'm gonna butcher this guy's name, which is terrible. But Mansour OJ.
OJ, that's it, that's the one. Yes.
Yeah, and actually only
Yeah.
68. No age at all.
No,
No
it's
age at
not.
all.
No, it's not. And I've got to say though, I mean that guy, he bled motorsport through and through.
Hmm.
But because I guess because him and Ron Dennis were such sort of powerful individuals, there was inevitably going to be a clash of power there, and
Yeah.
you know, in its prime. Don't get me wrong. Like when you look at that in its prime, their partnership was bulletproof, absolutely brilliant.
Well, go back to 88, 89. You know, what we're talking about, 15 out of 16 race wins for that car.
Yeah.
And the only one they didn't win was because Senna and Prost took each other out in Suzuka.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you don't get much more dominant than that McLaren Honda era of the late 80s, early 90s. And that's, see, we're verging back into F1 quite easily now. It's sort of natural thing for us, isn't it? But that's what I had high hopes for when Alonso returned to McLaren and they re-announced the McLaren Honda regime again. And given their dues, McLaren persevered with that contract for a really long time. There was at least 3 seasons, and those famous memes and images of Fernando Alonso lounging at Interlagos in the middle of the track on a deck chair. But it just wasn't competitive enough, and they had to pull the plug. And it was such a shame because there was a real opportunity lost there.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of been proven even more now with looking at where Honda are now with Red Bull, and you just think. Oh, what could have been, you know, what could have been.
Well, but I don't think we're going to see that lasting much more because Honda officially pulled out at the beginning of the season and Red Bull have bought the rights to that engine,
yes.
which is why they're now buying up engineers and technical bods because they know they're going to have to keep developing that for the rest of the season. And then presumably they'll move to something new or different next year, or they'll try and reconstitute the design into something that fits into the new model.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where that goes. Actually, to be fair, because I think if any team on the grid can pull off the making of their own engine, bearing in mind who their technical director is, the Adrian Newey, the god of curves and aerodynamics. I am very excited to see just what they can pull off because I mean it's not like what's his name Matashits, the Red Bull boss, is short of a few pennies. You know, if they need, you know, like they're literally building in Milton Keynes right now a whole new fucking factory to build an engine in. It's just ridiculous. But he could just literally there's a check, off you go and do what you need to do. You know, it's. Where I feel sorry for Williams in that respect because they can't just go, let's build a whole. You know.
But is Newey still as active as he once was? Because I know he was heavily involved in the Aston Martin Vulcan, and he sort of, it feels like he stepped away and took a bit of a sabbatical. And I know Red Bull have said he's definitely going to be around and with the team, but is he quite in the position that he was?
The dynamic of Red Bull's changed. I mean, I was speaking to a good friend of mine, Dan. You might know him, Dan Drury.
Yeah, I know Delhi.
Yeah, and obviously he now works for the Red Bull Formula One team. That's where he works.
Does indeed.
And you know, he was. I mean, we talk every now and again, not like all the time anymore. He used to game with us a lot, but like in testing, he goes down. He actually gets a chance to go down the track, and he's like this tech guru, plugs the computer in and starts up the engine, all that kind of shit. You know, it's fascinating stuff. But like, I was having a discussion with him, and like, you know, he's saying Adrian Newey is still involved, very much so, but more behind the scenes now than because he used to be quite, you know, one of the faces of Red Bull. He was always on the podium, like up there getting a trophy, or he was on the pit wall. You know, he's always sort of around. He's still very much designing the cars, old style, with the old drawing board and everything, where other designers, the one that stands out as being the worst, Nick Worth of the Virgin Racing car, that decided, I can design it all purely on a computer and I don't need to wind tunnel. And then they get to Australia in 2010 and, I've designed the car too small, so therefore... we can't fuel the car to the end, so you're going to have to run in lean mix for the entire race. You know, there's a lot to be said for an old school, like pencil and paper, and just fucking draw shit. Like it's weird how his mind works, but he always produces the goods.
Well, he does. Let's face it. He's been around doing this since the late '80s, so he's seen and come
Yes.
up with that design. I mean, the computer-aided design that was around in the late '80s is not a patch on what we have available to us now. But I mean, what was his first? He did the FW14B.
March. He did.
So
But he was March Leighton House before that, wasn't he?
So yeah, I think he was at March before that. I was thinking more about his first championship-winning car because
Okay.
he was at Williams throughout that really dominant era of Mansell, Senna, Hill.
Yeah.
I mean, those were some challenging cars because that was around about the time of the active aero, active suspension, and things were a little bit tricky, especially when they were banned. But well, I suppose it's one of those things. It was my era. That's very much what I grew up watching.
Yeah. 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 I mean, obviously, I'm a little bit behind that. I kind of know him more for the McLaren days, and then after years with them getting poached by Red Bull of all people, which was just like a jaw-dropping moment when that was announced that he was going to Red Bull. Yeah.
So do you know what? I'm going to make a really bold statement here, and I have no proof or evidence to back this up, but it's always been a firm belief of mine. I think one of the most underrated characters in helping Red Bull to get to where they are today is David Coulthard.
Yeah.
Because he moved from... He went straight from the McLaren to the Red Bull, didn't he?
Yes.
There wasn't anything in between, yeah. So McLaren, still at the time a competitive car, he still could have competed for stuff. He was obviously starting to wind down his career a little bit. The time had come. But he dragged what was a fairly mediocre Jaguar into the Red Bull era and saw that development through. And I'm sure he retired, and it was the following year was the first time Red Bull won a title. Now, I'm going to have to Google that to see if I'm right.
So Coulthard retired from. So his last actual season of racing was 2008.
But wasn't Sebastian Vettel's first championship winning season 2009?
No, that's Jenson Button. How could you?
Oh, of course. Well, but in fairness, Vettel was second in that season then, wasn't he?
He was.
Yeah.
And what I will say is that David Coulthard did stay on as the test driver for 2009 for Red Bull.
Okay.
So you can say, quite legitimately, that Coulthard was a driving force behind that team.
Yeah.
Getting to where it ultimately got to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, his career was definitely on the wind down when you look at his points totals for the seasons, but.
Yeah,
I mean, still done his bit.
That comes with a lot of things, you know. When you're young, there's always this sort of live fast, die young mentality that is associated with male gender. So, you know, as a young man driving a Formula One car in the early '90s for the first time ever, you know, he can afford to drive it like his hair's on fire and hope for the best. Once you're married, you've got kids and you've got things on the line, and you're getting a bit older, a bit wiser. Plus, your reflexes aren't quite what they used to be. There's always going to be a bit of a downturn.
I mean, I still stand by this. I think the turning point in Coulthard's career was the plane accident. That when he had that plane accident in 2001, bearing in mind he was in the form of his life at the beginning of the season, and you know he was right up there with Schumacher. After that, if you look at his results, he wasn't quite as cutthroat with his manoeuvres, wasn't quite as risky as he was before surviving the plane crash.
Okay.
It's an interesting thing, and I think Murray Walker at some point made some comment on it, and he said, you know, something like that though will undoubtedly change your perspective on life.
Mm.
And yeah, I think I'm sure it's Murray Walker who said that, but you know, obviously don't quote me.
You heard it here, folks. It's a direct quote. Yeah. He said it.
I said it, but I was looking at it in a bit more detail. I was thinking, yeah, do you know what? He wasn't as cutthroat. He wasn't as he wasn't just gonna when him and Schumacher, when he used to battle with Schumacher, and they'd be like touching wheels and stuff like that. That kind of disappeared from Coulthard's sort of aggressive nature of right, I'm getting the move done now, and he was a bit more risk averse.
Okay. I
Very
mean,
interesting.
I could see it. I could see it. It's not something that's ever crossed my mind before, but I could absolutely see it. But I mean, when you talk to me about Schumacher and Coulthard, there's only one image that comes to mind, which is Schumacher coming up to, I believe, lap David Coulthard at Spa in the pouring
Yeah.
rain, and then DC lifting and Schumacher smashing into the back of them and taking them both out of the race, and
Yeah.
then the famous pictures of Schumi marching down the pit lane trying to find him.
Yeah. Yeah. Spot on.
That was around
Like,
about 2001, wasn't it?
that was 98.
Was it really?
That was 98. Yeah, that was
Oh.
98. Because that is when Damon Hill and Ralph Schumacher finished 1-2 for Jordan. So
Yes. Yeah. Tell Eddie. If we race, we could lose this. But if we stay
Yeah.
as we are, yeah.
yeah,
I remember
yeah,
that.
that legendary thing. Here's one for you then. So David Coulthard
Mm.
last won a race. Ooh, where did he win a race? Let's have a look. Just looking at David Coulthard. So after his crash in his airplane crash in 2001, he only went on to win 2 more races after that. He only won 2 more races after his plane crash.
But see,
Very,
interestingly, I don't remember DC spending a lot of time on the top step of the podium. I remember him always being on the podium, but Mika was your lead driver
Oh.
around about that time, you know, the flying Finn.
he
So,
was glorious.
oh, wasn't he just? I always hoped he would come back. He did that sort of, I'm not retiring, I'm just taking a brief sabbatical. And I always hoped he would take a year or two out and come back, and he never did, the bastard.
Yeah.
But yeah, DC would always be second to Mika or third when Schumi was around. So he was always on the podium. He was always there or thereabouts in the mix, but sort of a bit like a Mark Webber in that respect. Sort of always the bridesmaid, never the bride.
Yeah, I mean, 13 race wins. I think that's the same as Webber, isn't it? 13.
Probably is, actually.
But 62 podiums for DC.
Yeah. I mean, that's not a bad return.
It's not. And he's had 12 pole positions and 18 fastest laps, which is still not a bad thing.
Well, but it goes back to what I said earlier. You know, for what was he, 94? Because he came in as the test driver when Senna died, and he would have been in, we're saying, until 2010, give or take. So 16 years, he would have been one of the top-rated drivers in the world for 16 years, and of those top-rated 20, on 62 individual races, he was in the top 3.
Yeah.
You can't knock that. You just can't knock it.
No, and yeah, some people always sort of say, "Oh, he should have achieved more," but then when you look at the drivers around in his era, like fucking good luck, because yeah, you know, yeah, DC, and of course he's in the new F1 game. He's one of the drivers you can hire in the new F1 game.
Oh, is he really?
If you buy the Legends pack, he is one of the extra drivers they've included. And I'll tell you what, he looks like DC does now. He's not a young DC. He's very much an aging DC. And it's the same for Alan Prost, who is also in that pack. So
the last time I saw Alan Prost on TV, he looked nearly dead. I thought someone was carting him off in a wheelchair. It was shocking.
yeah, he's not aged gracefully, that's for sure.
He's really not. He's really not.
No.
But you see, I always struggled with this. So I always liked Alan Prost, and growing up, my dad was a massive Alan Prost fan. Once I got to an age where I started to form my own opinions rather than just do whatever my dad's opinions were, I became very much the Senna fan, and therefore you always naturally align yourself with whoever it is you like the most. So when Senna and Prost had their little tete-a-tete, I came down on the side of Senna and therefore lost a bit of love for Prost. I know they made up in years to come, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, we haven't had a rivalry really in a while that's been sort of where they're willing to just drive each other off the fucking track. You know, we've not had that.
Do you mean in the same team?
Yeah, I mean, like don't forget, you had like Rosberg and Hamilton, that got quite tense.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say.
Webber and Vettel.
Webber and Vettel. Now, the one that stands out for me is Turkey,
Uh,
where they come barreling down the end of the straight into that hairpin.
oh yes.
Oh, and they
Yeah.
just tangled, and I just.
See, I always think of I forget the track. I'm fairly sure it was Malaysia. That was in Malaysia, Multi 21.
Multi 21. Yeah. Yeah.
So that for me was the start of the breakdown there.
It was, and it only got worse from there because they got to Silverstone where it was meant to be Webber's turn to have the new part, and they gave the new front wing to Vettel, and that's when Webber went out there, and fair play to the lad with the older front wing, just decimated the fucking field and took the win and jumps on the radio. Not bad for a number 2 driver, eh?
Yes, I remember that. Not bad for a number 2 driver.
I was just thinking, that is when the tensions were getting.
Yeah.
They were getting pretty tense, but
so going back before that, then, so you could argue Hakkinen and Schumacher, but I think Hakkinen was too composed for that kind of a rivalry. There was a little bit there, but not in the same level. The only other one before that for me would be Damon and Schumacher for those couple of years. I still vividly remember Schumi going off. It wasn't Melbourne, it was Adelaide. It was the last Australian Adelaide. He went off, rejoined. Hill went to overtake him, and Schumacher took him out. Nearly flipped his own car in the process. I mean, that was the start of a really challenging period between the two of them.
Oh, it was that actually made that kind of few years of Formula One. And I think, actually, to be fair, following obviously everything that happened with Senna, it needed something like that, and that they fucking provided. I tell you, they took each other out of Silverstone as well, coming out of Bridge, where Damon went for that ridiculous move up the inside that was never on, but just launches it up the inside anyway. And
well, Schumacher had some mixed luck at Silverstone because it was he went straight on at Stowe Corner. That's where he broke his legs.
Yes.
And was it Mika Salo they got to drive his car?
Yeah. So Irvine obviously become the de facto team leader.
Yeah.
And Mika Salo, and that was quite an interesting one because obviously. Mika Salo, I don't know if you follow him on Twitch because he's got his own Twitch community now.
Does he really? Oh right, I've got to see this.
And he streams Dirt Rally. That is what he streams. That's what he does. And I'll tell you what, he's shit hot at it. But he had a discussion on one of his streams, and there was actually a whole behind the scenes rigmarole to actually get him in the car. So, although he was Ferrari's reserve driver, he had actually been loaned to BAR for the 1999 season to be one of their development drivers, and BAR didn't want to release him to go back to Ferrari. And it was basically, I don't know what happened, but in the end it all worked out. And so Salo jumps in that car, because obviously Salo should have won the German Grand Prix.
He should have done.
And even Irvine has said that, and not every driver would have slowed down that amount to let Irvine through to win that race.
No, absolutely.
If you had someone who was a bit more, I don't know, pig-headed and wanted to basically take a victory, but legitimately, he should have won that race. And I always wonder what Salo would have done given the proper equipment.
Ferrari were always very lucky with their number 2 drivers. I mean, think about Rubens Barrichello backing off at the line at Austria and the whole hoo-ha that caused. Massa and Alonso. Alonso is faster than you. Confirm you've understood this message? I mean, they've always done this sort of shit. They've always had a number 1 and a number 2. It's never going to be an equal footing there. I'd argue that behind the scenes there is a favouritism for Charles Leclerc over Carlos Sainz Jr. at Ferrari at the moment, and I don't see that as an equal footing. There is one driver there that is favoured more than the other.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, fair play to Carlos. I mean, he's getting his head down and just cracking on with the job, and he's a handy racer. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong though, but I found it a very surprising move when it was announced he was going to Ferrari. I didn't see that one initially anywhere.
I didn't.
Zach Brown had made references to we're building the future with Lando and Carlos, and I kind of just it was taken that okay, well this is the partnership McLaren are going with, and then the next thing we know is there's rumours that Carlos is going to Ferrari to replace Vettel, and I was like, what? Like, where's that suddenly come from? But yeah.
Well, it was sort of. I mean, that was silly season, wasn't it? Because the announcement that Seb wouldn't stay on came at just the most ridiculous time. Because what was he driving for the rest of the season? It was just bizarre.
And that showed in his results, really. I mean, you look at Vettel's results. It was.
He was nowhere. He was nowhere,
Yeah,
and he was constantly outperformed by Charles Leclerc. So
it almost looked given up.
Yeah.
You know.
As a quick sidebar, whilst we were talking about Mika Salo and you mentioned he's on Twitch, obviously I've had to go and have a look and see his Twitch profile. This is something I think is just amazing. So I have a Twitch profile, you have a Twitch profile, lots of people stream, and we all have some kind of a blurb underneath our name. You know, kind of, hi, I'm Pulsar Man, I play these kind of games, blah, 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 come and join the fun, whatever. Mika Salo's blurb just says this: former Formula 1 legend.
But is he wrong?
No, he's not wrong in the slightest. But there's something about being, a little bit humble. It's obviously a very British thing to just, be a little bit humble. And he's not British. He's Finnish, so he can do whatever the fuck he wants.
I think that's meant in jest though, because he's actually very he does take the piss out of himself on stream quite a lot. He does. He's kind of a meme lord. He's actually a bit of a meme lord when he's live.
Oh,
yeah, he kind of plays up to all the stereotypes. It's brilliant.
Well, I've added my account to his list of 15,000 followers, and I shall eagerly await his next stream so I can go and see what it's all about.
The thing is, he's bloody good.
Wow.
You don't just get to Formula One without some form of skill. So
no, absolutely. And hey, when we're talking about Finnish Formula One drivers and Finnish rally drivers, I mean, Mika Häkkinen has rallied, Kimi Räikkönen has rallied, Valtteri Bottas rallies when he has a chance. It's in their blood, it's in their nature.
Yeah, it is.
Well, actually, saying that, how many Finnish World Rally champions have there been?
Ooh, I mean, you've got a handful there, haven't you?
Well, I want to say Juha Kankkunen, and then I'm immediately worrying that he might not be Finnish, but I'm sure he is.
Well, what about Hirvonen? Was he not? He was. Oh, you see,
Christ!
You wanted to move on to WRC champions now, are you?
Wow, I'm sort of making that natural step, aren't I? So no, I was right. So Juha Kankkunen. Timo Salonen, so one of the 205 drivers, Ari Vartanen and Markku Allen from back in the day, and then of course
just throw one in there.
Go on.
Tommy Mäkinen.
Yeah,
Tommy Mäkinen.
the modern
was he not
legend.
Mitsubishi, something like that. I remember his game. He had some games out for a while, didn't he?
He did indeed. Well, there is still one of the most valuable Mitsubishi Evo 6s is the Evo 6 Tommy Mäkinen edition. If you can get a TME, they're worth a few quid.
What about there was one other, and I think he went on to race for Ford a lot recently. I don't know if he actually still is. He'd be getting on a bit now. Fucking.
So you are thinking of
is it Gronholm?
Marcus Gronholm? Yeah, he took 2 titles. He was in the Peugeot. He used to rally the 206 back in the day. I think I saw a little while ago he was temporarily managing the Ford team.
No,
I'm sure I saw that. I think it was sort of by proxy rather than by choice. I think the Ford team manager had stepped down and he'd filled in. Can I see anything about this? Made a return in the Pro Drive. Limited appearance in the 2019 World Rally Championship where he drove the Toyota Gazoo Racing Yaris. Jesus. So he was still rallying in 2019.
It was a one-off though, wasn't it? Was that just a one-off?
Well, probably.
It didn't go particularly well for him. I remember that. It wasn't like the return to glory that everyone was kind of, hoping.
No, it's too late in his career for that. But I'm sure he's been around. I've seen him in the paddock a few times.
Probably has, in fairness. I mean, it seems to be kind of a natural progression for racing drivers now to sort of, progress to a behind-the-scenes kind of role. I mean, look at the amount of teams that Nico Rosberg now owns. I mean, he's got
Yeah,
team. He's got his fingers in many pies. Albeit his dad Keke had already set up a number of them, but now it's kind of Rosberg's got his own Extreme E team. He's same as Lewis Hamilton's got his own Extreme E team as Jenson Button, but.
I think
Yeah,
if it's in your blood, it's in your blood. I mean, we see it with
yeah,
footballers. The amount of professional footballers that reach the pinnacle of their career, and when they retire, they then either go on to become a coach or a manager or something similar to keep their hand in the game, or even a pundit. We watched the
yeah.
football tonight, and Alan Shearer, Mika Richards, and
Oh,
Roy Keane were all there with Gary Lineker. I mean, all of those guys go, apart from Mika Richards, they all go back a fair few years. So if you've got that passion, if it runs in your veins, you want to stick with it.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Shall we talk about the current Formula One season, since we sort of skirted all the way around it?
We did. We talked about the better Formula One seasons. So
We did. We did. Although this year's actually looking pretty tasty, I've got to say. It is looking pretty tasty.
I think this year's done. I think I can predict the finishing positions this season already.
So here's a bold one for you.
Hmm.
So I was having this discussion. God, who was I talking to? Let me have a look. It might well have been Fergie Master. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Good old Fergie. But there was someone anyway from the gaming world that I was talking to, and I made the bold statement that if Hamilton does not win this year's championship, he will never win a championship again.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to disagree with you on that then.
I've gone down the Schumacher route here, and I've said basically he's reached 7. He's not going to win another title. But that was kind of, for me, that's kind of been rolling into sort of complete disarray, because following that, Mercedes are now bringing some updates to their car, and that worries me.
They've got form.
Yes.
So I'm gonna go
Yeah.
a different route. My thoughts now, as a fan of Lewis, anyone who knows me knows that I support Lewis, and I'm happy to see the Mercedes team win. I think Max is going to win his first title this season in the Red Bull. I think Lewis is going to be the runner-up. I think Sergio is going to take bronze, and I think Valtteri's going to be in 4th, possibly in 5th. Lando Norris might end up pipping him. Just
from consistency.
Yeah.
I was thinking the same. Yeah, absolutely think the same. And do you know what? I'm in complete agreement with your order there. Complete agreement. And that doesn't happen very often.
No, it doesn't. Christ, well, hang on. What are we going to talk around for the next hour and a half?
Shit. Well, guys, thanks for tuning in.
Well, but I have more. So I think
Okay.
at the end of this season, I think that's bye-bye Valtteri. I think George deserves the chance in that car, and he's going to get it. He's going to get that chance next year. I don't know where Valtteri will go. I don't know if he'll get another seat. I think he's still good enough to get another seat, but it depends if one opens up. But I also think that Mercedes are reducing their investment in this year's car significantly and are already focusing heavily on next year's rules. And I think even if Red Bull are doing that, I think they're going to have significant challenges engine-wise with a different chassis, a different width, ground effect, and everything else that comes with it. And I think the Mercedes will be the dominant car again next year with the rule changes.
Yeah. Okay.
That's my prediction.
I agree. I think Red Bull have gone too much into car development this season. I think they should have just knocked this one on the head. Bearing in mind they've got Adrian Newey, like that is their weapon. Their weapon of, for new technical regulations when it comes to aerodynamics, Adrian Newey is the man you want sitting in the office penning your designs.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't think of anyone I'd want more, frankly.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, he does have a habit of making the rear end very tightly packaged and causing overheating issues, but Red Bull have always managed to overcome that. And, bearing in mind it's going to be their own engine from next season, well, kind of, sort of. I know Honda have agreed to maintain the engines until their facility is up and running, which is, that's a good deal.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind where the engine has come to. But what I wanted to move on to with this, the subject of the engine as well. I don't know if you saw Lewis Hamilton coming out with some pretty sour comments. He's now, of all the people, bearing in mind Mercedes had party mode, he's now come out and said Red Bull have got a hidden party mode on their engine. That's why they're so much faster at the moment. And I kind of just like, Lewis, mate, like, you're in the fight of your life now. This is, you've got to earn your keep. Show us what these 7 world titles are against a young whippersnapper like bloody Max Verstappen,
So that's really interesting. I haven't seen that claim. I will say I do think it's interesting that a fairly uncompetitive engine that managed to make its way onto a few podiums last year is suddenly now quicker than the engine that's been leading the field for the last 5 to 6 years. So something's happened there, and I'd find it a little hard to believe that little old Red Bull, with all their Formula One and aerodynamic might, are able to extract more out of an engine designed by Honda, who have been building cars for, well, probably the best part of 100 years now, I should imagine. I mean, Honda are not new to this game. So there's something interesting there. I'm not saying for one second I think there's any legality issues. And I've certainly heard the complaints about flexible wings, which is also nothing new for Red Bull. They've been around this merry-go-round a few times with front wings back in Vettel's era.
Yes, indeed. Yeah,
when it comes to the battles, I don't know. This is where I really struggle with modern Formula One. Ever since I understand DRS and it's great and it makes the racing nice and close. What I loathe is the fact that we need DRS in order to make the racing close, because we've made the cars so aerodynamically challenging that they're impossible to follow because of the dirty air they create in their wake. And I really, really hope with all of my being that these changes they're making next year to reduce some of that ornate aero, go back to a ground effect system, which is a really interesting one, and to increase the tyre size and reduce the wings to try and change the way the air's flowing over the car, will allow us to go back to that close racing. Because I want to see natural slipstream. I want to see wheel-to-wheel racing. I don't want to hear, sorry boss, I've been behind him for 3 laps, my tyres are getting too hot and I just can't get close to them because of the dirty air, I'm going to have to drop back. That's not racing.
No, and that was shown in the last race.
Yeah.
What did you have? You had 7th place all the way through to P13, and they were just stuck in a train. And people were having to pull out of the toe of the other car in front just to get some cool air through, and you just think, oh, like, where have we gone so wrong? And it all does come down to the aero. The aero with all these little winglets and stuff. Yeah, it makes your car go faster when it's on its own, but when you're trying to follow another car, it makes it impossible. We've seen it makes it bloody impossible, and then we're led to sort of hope and pray for, I don't know, a mistake in the pits or something like that to change the order about. And it's not genuine hard racing anymore where you could, like, the one that stands out for me, okay, let's go back to Mika Häkkinen, Michael Schumacher, Belgium, right? The distance that Häkkinen was back from the Ferrari, gets in the toe of the Ferrari, then the BAR of Ricardo Zonta, who's left sandwiched in the middle thinking, oh my fucking God, what do I do here? But that toe effect back then, or that, bearing in mind that was the dawn of when it started to really heavily become aero focused, but they were still able to slipstream back then, and that proved it, because he was fucking miles back, but when he got in that toe, my God, did that Mercedes engine in that McLaren fucking power him along.
Didn't it just? So I think there's a real sweet spot in F1 history where this happened, because if you go back to your Jackie Stewart days and, even to some degree your James Hunt days, the winner was the car that could create you the most reliable car, because not every car on the field would last 70 laps, and it wasn't uncommon for 26 cars to start and only 3 to finish. So that's not the greatest era in my personal opinion. And then the modern era where they are ultra reliable but are so technical in their aero that even if you have a wheel-to-wheel incident and you lose one canard from the left-hand side of your floor, that's you done for the entire race. This is
Yes.
bullshit as well. The sort
Yeah.
of the great era for me is the 80s and the 90s, and I always think of people like Nigel Mansell. I mean, Christ, if you look at some of the modern athletes, because let's face it, that's what Formula One drivers are now. They are
Yeah. Oh yeah.
chiseled athletes who spend their life in the gym. Nigel Mansell was a mustached brummie who'd been drinking a Guinness and off down the golf course first chance he got, but he drove that car with nothing more than grit, determination, and big balls, and he would overtake you even if his car was slower and damaged and on fire, because he would push that car further than anyone else was prepared to. That was racing. That's what it was about.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's yes, very very legitimate to be honest. Because Mansell was one of a kind. He was tenacious, shall we say?
It's a good word as any.
Yeah, and he just didn't give up. Like it's just you know, I remember when he tried to push what was it his Lotus across the bloody start finish line and he passed
Yeah.
out.
That was, I want to say that was Seattle, but that was where it was so hot that they had to relay the track between qualifying and the race because it was melting and breaking up as the cars were going over it. And he broke down, it must have been the last lap, just by the finish line, and tried to push it over and passed out from heat exhaustion. I mean, that takes something. There's people aren't made like that anymore. There's something special there.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, I guess that's why he's always referred to as our Nige. You know, just he endeared himself to the British fans. I still remember like fans would flood the racetrack after the race had finished when he won a race. You know, especially Silverstone.
Well, they had to send a van to go and pick him up because he couldn't actually get back.
Yeah. It's just like insane because, like, don't get me wrong, Hamilton's got a big following, but they never struck me as intense fans as much as Nigel had. They were never quite to that level where they just fucking invade and like party the hell out of like the track because he's won a race. I mean. There is one saying that bugs me with Hamilton. I'm going to say it. Every track he goes to, he goes, "Oh yeah, these are the best fans in the world here." It's like, yeah, you said that last race.
Yeah, so I think Lewis in the early part of his career was exactly like I would have been. He wore his heart on his sleeve. He was emotional. He said what came to mind. Sometimes that came across as really true and open and honest, and people appreciate it. And sometimes it was, no, he's a fucking dickhead, I can't hate him. Did you see what the twat did to me on track? And obviously in the modern world that's not very PC. So I think Lewis had, in the early days of his career, some very heavy guidance and rules to follow and a lot of PR training, which I suspect he's still going under in some way, shape or form, which is steering him in how he speaks and how he has to speak. And that's also a sign of just the modern times we live in, and how we do have free speech, but only if it agrees with everyone else's morals. If it doesn't, you can't say it.
It's very true. It's very true, yeah.
And there's a can of worms I'm going to put the lid back on quite quickly before anything else happens.
We'll put that back in the cupboard.
Yeah. But let's not forget, when we talk about Nige, Nige came close to a couple of championship wins. You know, he had that famous tyre blowout. I think that was, I can't remember if it was Piquet or Prost won that year.
That was heartbreaking. That was, yeah.
Oh, it was. But obviously he eventually won in 92. And then immediately left Formula One to go over to America to drive in the kart IndyCar series in 93. Won the title over there, and was for a brief period the only person in the world to be the world champion in kart and Formula One. And I don't think anyone's done that since.
No, because if you do it the other way round, because the Formula One season continues after the American season has already finished. Because I was gonna say. No, because even then that wouldn't even match up. No, so ignore me. No one has. No one has legitimately done that.
Yeah.
I think he's the only one to simultaneously hold both crowns.
There you go.
What an achievement that is. That's remarkable.
It is. It really is. And then of course he still came back after that because he did a couple of jobs in the '94 Williams after Senna died.
Yes, yes, it
And
did.
then I remember he was supposed to go to McLaren in '95.
Oh,
Was it him and Mario Andretti? I think I always remember Andretti being around, but it might not have been. And there were some issues where bless him, he'd put on a little bit of timber and he was a bit too big to get in the car, and they had to widen it slightly to get him in. And then I think he just threw in the towel and said, "I've had enough now."
yeah. I think because the race he did get in the car, it wasn't his finest performance.
No.
No, and to be honest, that McLaren wasn't the finest a McLaren ever built. It was quite an ugly car, I thought. Probably one of their ugliest that they've built. Like,
Well,
yeah, it had the traditional Marlboro livery, but the actual shape of it was.
but I'm trying to think. So '95, that would have been they wouldn't have been with Honda anymore. This is around about those failed relationships with Peugeot and their brief dally with Lamborghini engines. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm sure. When did the? It was 95 was the first year with Mercedes engines.
Was it really?
That was the first year with Mercedes. Yeah, that's because they brought in a Mercedes engine to replace that Lamborghini piece of crap from '94. Um,
It was dog shit. It really was a dog shit
yeah.
engine.
Well, I mean, the Lamborghini deal was like they signed their fucking death sentence from the beginning, and they ended up actually moving to Peugeot, didn't they? Part of the way through '94.
Mm.
And yeah, then they moved to Mercedes Benz. Although, I mean, you call it Mercedes Benz, but that first engine in that McLaren that was badged a Mercedes Benz, that was actually an Ilmor. It was actually an Ilmor engine that Mercedes took and slightly improved.
Oh,
A
okay.
little old Ilmor, and they're still going as well, by the way. Ilmor, still in existence.
Still working with the Pacific team.
Don't.
Oh, we all have fond memories of the
Oh.
Pacific Ilmore.
Well,
That-
I mean, I did attempt to do a career mode with that, but that car was shocking.
I know. I watched a few of your YouTube streams on it.
Yes, yes, yeah. Well, I mean, Ilmore, just putting it out there, they actually had a brief. This is really bizarre because I did not expect this to. And I know this is going off on a tangent, but they briefly entered the 2007 MotoGP season
Really?
with their own motorbike. Yes, and they actually competed in 2006 as well.
Oh,
Yeah. So they had Gary McCoy as their rider.
okay.
Apparently, he's won a couple of races. I don't really know much about MotoGP. Sorry, motorbike fans. Um, but he scored points on it in the 2006 Portuguese Grand Prix and 2006 Valencia Grand Prix.
Hmm.
Um, but, which, although he scored points, I'm just going to say he did finish last on both occasions.
Oh,
um, the
okay.
Portuguese Grand Prix, he was 4 laps down on the race winner, and the Valencia Grand Prix, he was 7 laps down on the race winner.
But he was in the running, and that's what counts.
He was in the running, and then the team went bankrupt just on the eve of the 2007 season. So, yeah. But
Brilliant.
yeah, so there you go. The first Mercedes engine in a McLaren was actually a rebadged Ilmor.
Well, you see, ladies and gentlemen, every day's a school day.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. I mean, let's bring it back forwards to the modern day then. So obviously we've actually had a pretty interesting start to the season. The midfield
Hmm.
has actually been pretty close this season.
Yeah, it has. The midfield
Yeah.
feels much more competitive than I've seen it for a while. And I wouldn't say, well, no, I was going to say I wouldn't say there's one team that's really straggling, but of course it has. They're nowhere. But the Williams
You're
is more competitive.
yeah, the Williams. I don't know what it is that is with Williams at the moment, but they seem to have a much clearer direction. They seem to know what they're doing at the moment, which is quite a nice, refreshing sort of thing because they've languished at the back for years, and that's. I don't know about you, mate, but it just doesn't sit right with me seeing a Williams on the back row. It just.
Well, I think
you know,
it doesn't sit right with me not having someone with the surname Williams leading the team. But
yes,
equally, I have to concede that I think they are where they are at the moment because of the financial investment from the people that
yeah,
bought the team. So yeah, there's only so far I can
yeah,
take that argument.
yeah. Doralton Capital, who I've never heard of them before they actually brought the team. So,
Mm,
you know, but I can't fault them for keeping the team alive. They've kept the name, and they've kept people in jobs, and it wasn't looking quite so rosy when you rewind 18 months ago, 2 years, and
no.
you just where you just at that point I was thinking, do you know what, they're going to go out of business if they don't score points this season. That they're gone, and then all of a sudden Claire's decided to sell the team, which I'm not sure what Sir Frank would have truly thought about that in his heart.
Mm.
It always makes me wonder, because I mean, I don't know if you did you watch the Williams docu movie, whatever you want to call it. It was
Oh
a
yeah.
movie, but thing. But I didn't realise that there was such a relationship breakdown between Claire and her brother. I didn't realise that they had a massive falling out over who should have been leading the team, because he thought it should have been him,
Mm.
and obviously Sir Frank chose his daughter, and obviously her brother was then left to run the heritage side of things, which obviously the legend that is Karun Chandok drives. Um, I'm not sure I would have. No disrespect to Karun, because I'm sure, yeah, he seems like a really nice guy, but I wouldn't have entrusted some of our finest collection of historic cars in his hands. But he hasn't crashed them yet, so
Well, you see, you said the word "yet" there. It's like you're expecting
yeah.
it to happen.
Oh, he's still driving them now. I mean, it's good that they kept the cars alive. But like you say, they're other people's cars now.
Yeah,
They're not they're not owned by Williams.
and that's
It's a
sad.
weird and sad way to go, because you think, if the people that own those cars now have a falling out with the owners of the team,
Mm.
they could legitimately just go, right, well, I'm taking my car then, and that's it, and then it will be gone for the public eye.
Well, I'd hope there's some really robust legislation and legal
Yeah,
writs in the background that would stop them doing that. But equally, they could lose any of the goodwill that might grant extensions to those leases or what have you. So yeah, there's a long term risk for the future. But that's the writing's been on the wall there for a while. It was back when Massa and Stroll were driving for the car. They had a real struggle getting a sponsor. Then they were sponsored by Martini and Shaw. And then after Massa retired, they lost one of the. I think there was Martini pulled out and said they weren't going to
it
sponsor
did.
anymore. And then
Rexona was the other sponsor. They also went, didn't they?
yeah, well Rexona was Shaw. I think we
Oh
call it
right,
Shaw
okay,
deodorant in this country, but it's Rexona
yes,
elsewhere. But
right.
yeah, it was a really worrying time for Williams, and I hope that they really have turned a corner and that things are going to get better for them. But my other fear with that, and again, I know I've said it a few times, they're supposed to be the best drivers in the world, and I accept that. George Russell is a very good, very capable, very competent driver that deserves an opportunity in a race winning car.
Yes.
I do not rate Nicholas Latifi particularly highly.
Yeah. No, Latifi. I mean, if we're going to be brutally honest, he's there for one reason, and that is the big bucks that he brings with him from Canada. And
Hmm.
yeah, don't get me wrong, he's been a world better than a certain Nikita Mazepin. Um,
Get used to him, folks. He ain't going anywhere anytime soon because his
he,
dad's got loads of money.
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up buying the goddamn team,
I
but
think it's on the cards. I think it'll happen.
I think it will happen. As much as I don't want it to happen, I think it will.
Hmm.
But yeah, both of those guys, Mazepin, Latifi, should they legitimately be on the grid? I would say no, because when you look at the drivers that, well, I mean, Nick De Vries for one,
Yeah.
he's a Formula Two champion, so he can no longer, by the rule set, he's not allowed to race in Formula Two anymore. So that is it. He's now having to make his way. I think he's in Formula E now. Formula E. And
Yeah, might be.
it's a shame because I think, these guys that win Formula 2, that should be the sign that in equal machinery they're the best of the best coming up.
Yeah.
And they should be given the chance to progress to Formula 1, but instead we've got two people filling two legitimate seats on the Formula 1 grid because of money.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I couldn't agree more, mate. And actually, there's a whole host of names you could pick from that grid. Callum Ilott, I think, is a great up and coming driver. And I believe, I think the problem with Callum Ilott is he's on the Ferrari Driver Academy.
Yeah.
And this is the other thing, is that does limit you somewhat into where you can go. So if you're a Ferrari Academy driver, you go into Haas or Alfa because they're not going to put you straight in the Ferrari. But equally, there'd be lots of discussions if there was a desire for you to go to, say, Renault. I'm not saying it wouldn't happen because we've seen it in the past. Ocon was a Mercedes driver when he went to Renault, was he not?
Yeah, he was. He was initially, and then they severed their ties with each other.
Yeah, I suspect there's been lots of backroom meetings about that, and I also suspect a lot of money has shared hands to buy him out of the contract. Equally, not sure I see why. I'm also not a fan of Esteban Ocon. I've never seen any amazing racecraft from him that I don't think I see from anybody else. I wouldn't be paying big bucks for him, but that's just me.
Yeah, he's got a contract renewal now, of course.
Yeah, you've just been given a 3-year extension, for fuck's sake.
Yeah. Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. Rather their money than mine.
Well, ultimately it is, it's their money. He's consistent, but he's not spectacular. He's not been spectacular I can't think in any race really. There isn't one defining race that stands out to me as, oh my god, this guy's gonna be a former, like a next world champion. That hasn't happened with Ocon. He's I think he's going to be a typical kind of, he'll pick you up some points, but is he much more than just a consistent midfield point scorer?
Yeah, and well, for anyone out there who remembers the film Rush, there was that famous statement when they were going to hire James Hunt for the McLaren, and they were going to pick between James Hunt and Jackie Ickx, and they said, listen, yeah, you'll get points with Jackie, but will he go for that win on that day when he's at his best? You're going to want James Hunt in your car. It's the same sort of thing with Esteban Ocon. He's an okay driver. He does okay. He'll get you a few points. I don't see him as a driver that's going to win a season. He's not going to win a driver's title anywhere. Just don't see it happening. His card was very much marked for me, and I'm going to put this out there and say I'm not really a huge Verstappen fan. I get that he's exciting and he does some interesting things and he's bringing a fresh new look, but I struggle to love the guy in the same way I have for previous drivers like Senna or Mansell. But it all goes back to that Interlagos incident where Ocon was unlapping himself from Verstappen and put his car in a fucking stupid position. I mean, the whole manoeuvre was ridiculous. Yeah. Max has to accept some of the blame in it, don't get me wrong, but it was 90% Ocon being a twat. And you can't have that when you're unlapping yourself from the race leader. I don't know what he was thinking.
No. I think that's always going to linger with him. Especially for Verstappen fans, they're not going to forget that. That's always going to be in the very forefront of their minds. So he'll pick you up points, but is he going to win you championships? No, is the answer to that one.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. I will say Verstappen seems to have matured over recent years. He seems to really sort of becoming, I don't know, for want of a better word, a man. He seems to be becoming a man, because let's not forget he made his F1 debut at age 17.
Yeah.
It feels like he's been around for a lifetime already, yet he's not even in the prime of his career yet. Yeah. And that is the scary thing to think about, that he's not in the prime of his career yet. potentially got the best years ahead of him.
He does. And this is something I find fascinating about modern F1 as well, because I don't know about you, Steve, but I can be really open and honest and say, do you know what I was like at 17? I can tell you, I was a complete dickhead. And I was probably a complete dickhead until I was about 21, 22. And then I was still a dickhead. I was just a bit less of a dickhead. So to think about being given that kind of a responsibility at 17 years old, I challenge that you can find the most mature 17-year-old in the world ever. They're still not ready for that responsibility. It's too much.
Yeah, agreed, agreed. I mean, he handled it bloody well though, for a 17-year-old.
He did, and there was a lot of pomp and ceremony around him, and a lot of press and what have you. And he did make some stupid mistakes. He did do some
Of
stupid
course.
stuff. He got a bit hot-headed.
Yep.
He started to build a reputation. It was almost going a bit Maldonado-ish. It was it was if he shows you a wheel, get out of his way because he's going to crash
Yeah.
into you. But he turned it around, and a lot of that, I suspect, some credit is due to his dad, Jos, who's
Yeah.
obviously
Yeah.
been on this merry-go-round before. But yeah, he did do incredibly well. But I'd argue that Lando Norris, as a really
Yes.
young driver coming through, has shown nothing but professionalism and just genuine niceness as he comes through. Charles Leclerc has been similar. He's come through as a young lad who's genuinely come
Yep.
across as a lovely guy. Albon, to some degree, is cut from the same cloth, as is George Russell. They've all come across as really nice guys.
Yeah. You see, this is the thing, and yeah, it's the next generation coming through, and like you say, Lando very actually quite humble. I don't know if you saw free practice today or any parts of it, but Lando he spun his car around basically coming out of turn one,
Okay.
and the team jumped on the radio, and his engineer was going. What damage have you got? What damage you got? And he jumps on the radio going, "My talent."
You see, I love that.
Yeah, and that just for me epitomised Lando in one. Like, he's not afraid to take the piss out of himself, and it was good. It was like that was quite the response, and I'm sure the McLaren pit wall had a few laughs to that.
I bet
But
they did. Well, so someone
yeah,
shared a video with me in my Discord last week of Lando Norris, and he was on the phone to his mum.
when the team ripping him, going, "Mummy,
Yeah.
mummy."
But actually, if you listen to the conversation, I'm sure he's saying something like, "Yeah, no, I know you were right, Mum, and I should have believed you. You were right, I know that." But equally, again, thinking about how much of a dickhead I was at 17, I wouldn't have wanted to be seen near dead with my mum when I was 17 years old because that wasn't cool.
Yeah.
He's not that kind of guy. He's like, "No, this is my mum. I don't give a shit whether it makes me cool or not. I'm going to talk to my mum."
Yeah.
I was a lot older when I came to that conclusion. It took me a long time to get that level of maturity.
Yeah, well, fair play to the lad. Though. I mean, yeah, I kind of feel I don't know about you, but obviously with Lando, I kind of feel that the whole because he had a bit of a bromance with Carlos and still does.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, those two together are a magical pairing. But I kind of feel they pressed the kind of meme team with him and Danny Rick a bit too early, where it just kind of felt a bit too forced. And
Yeah.
I mean, let's talk about Danny Rick. What do you make of his season so far?
I'm really disappointed for him. I really am. Because Danny Rick is a driver that actually I do have a lot of love for. I think he's got a lot of talent. Equally, again, he comes across as a thoroughly nice guy, really genuine. Think back to his railroad track braces smiles back in the day. Yeah, he's a good egg. And talent-wise, he went up against Seb, who at the time was lauded as the best driver on the grid, multiple world champion and the best car on the grid. And Danny Rick gave Seb a bloody nose until he left the team.
Yeah.
I thought he's made some really bold career choices, and I can see why he made them. Leaving Red Bull to go to Renault was a bold move, but manufacturer team with plenty of development and promises made sense. Finding himself at McLaren now, when McLaren had bringing themselves out of the doldrums was also brave, because we've seen people like Alonso go there and not do well after being on the same promises. And he's really struggling, and he's being massively outperformed by Lando. Now,
Yeah.
I think, to my mind, this can only be down to one thing, and this is that there is something in that car which doesn't suit his way of driving. That's all I can think it is.
Yeah. I would agree, because, I mean, the start of the last Grand Prix, so the Styrian Grand Prix that they want to call it, it's basically Austrian Grand Prix 1,
Mhm.
but obviously, yeah, for championship reasons. Off the start, he had a traditional, like, there was signs of Danny Rick in there, and you can see that he, underneath that service, he's itching to basically be up there with Lando. He's, and he should be.
Mhm.
And he pulled off some fantastic moves on that first lap. I think he went from, what did he go from 13th on the grid up to 8th on the grid in lap 1. Like, he went up like 5 places on the opening lap. Really strong start for him.
Yeah, but then he fell backwards rapidly afterwards.
He did. They had some car issue or something with the electronic control unit.
Okay.
It was in the wrong setting and they couldn't get it to change. And it took the software engineers to basically do something remotely to get it to reset, basically. But by then the damage was done, and he's back to being in that queue of traffic. But we haven't seen, because don't get me wrong, like Danny Rick, he was always the last of the late breakers. We've not really seen those kind of moves. I mean, the Renault was a dog of a car for a while, and like you say, that there's got to be something with the McLaren that isn't quite clicking for him. I mean, he's had some solid results. Like, he's been P6 3 times so far this season, but on each one of those occasions, he's been behind Lando, who's just extracted more from the car.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm just looking at the stats from that last race. So, if I go back to qualifying, Danny Rick was out in quali 2, so he only qualified in the first 2 sessions. His time in quali 1 was a 105.1, whereas Lando put in a 104.5, 6/10 quicker.
Yeah.
The next one, Danny Rick picked up the pace a bit and managed a 104.8. But Lando was doing a 104.9. There was still 6/10 between them. And in Formula 1, 6/10 is an absolute age.
104.2, just clarify.
Yes,
you
sorry.
Said 104.9. No, but yeah, in terms of Formula 1, that deficit to your teammate, I mean, let's rewind. Let's go back a year. When we were having those deficits between Albon and Verstappen, that only went one way. That it pains me.
I don't think we'll see. McLaren don't have form in the same way that Red Bull do for chopping and changing a driver mid-season. And frankly, there's a very different conversation to be had about trying to chop and change a driver with the caliber and background and history that Danny Rick has over someone like an Alex Albon.
Yes.
He ain't going anywhere. He'll be there throughout the season, but he's got to do something to pick up his results. He's not going to get a move, because he was talked about as a Ferrari driver in the future. He's not going to get a move to Ferrari based on his current results.
No. Yeah, and I mean, that was rumoured to be around the time when he was leaving Red Bull. Or was he going to go to Ferrari? There was a lot of talk about it. I mean, let's not forget, though, there was talk at one point of bloody Grosjean going to Ferrari when he moved to Haas. So, we shouldn't take that as kind of the bar. But
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, to be fair though, like when they started touting Grosjean for Ferrari, Grosjean was kind of in the form of his life, and he was doing very well. He had that psychologist or something, but.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're talking about the time when he was partnering Kimi Raikkonen at Lotus, when they were having a really good turn of form, which is what got Kimi his drive back at Ferrari.
It did, and like those two they were good for Lotus. Well, Genii Capital, really.
Yeah, not Lotus proper as we know it.
No. another driver I want to talk about, Sergio Perez.
Yeah, yeah,
Good old Checo. Do you know what? Red Bull must be feeling, I would say, much happier this season, knowing they've actually got a number two that can actually put in some decent results.
mm.
Um, it's been a while. It's been a while since Red Bull have had essentially two cars. It's been a while.
Yeah, a worrying amount of time, and I was starting to
Yeah.
wonder. Again, going back to that conversation we had earlier about are the cars set up right for the drivers? Is Danny Rick feeling that car? I was starting to wonder if Max had a very specific way that he liked the car set up on a knife edge or something that other drivers just couldn't adapt to. Because Pierre Gasly, we've seen him come up with some absolutely outstanding results in that, I still want to call it a Toro Rosso, AlphaTauri.
Yes.
But he couldn't come anywhere close to that in the Red Bull, in the the parent car.
No.
And
No.
Albon, I had really high hopes for Albon last season, especially after the start, the first Austrian Grand Prix, where he was running really well. He looked like he was going to get Lewis, and then he bit off a little bit more than he could chew, and Lewis punished him for it. And then that was it. He was nowhere for the rest of the season. So seeing Sergio bring that car into a decent position pleases me. But I'm equally not surprised. I think Sergio is a really good, really talented driver. And I think his career took a bit of a sideways turn because he got the big money move to a championship winning car too early, because he got that move to McLaren.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he did okay, but not up to the standards that they expected. And he was outshone by Lewis Hamilton, who was in the form of his life at that time driving the McLaren. So that was never going to be a great turn of events. Hang on, have I got... No. Was it Lewis or was it Jensen he drove with?
Jensen.
Was, yeah, because it was 2010, wasn't it? It was when Lewis left, Sergio came in.
Well, Lewis was still there in 2010.
Was it?
Yeah, Lewis. That was 2013. Because Lewis were moved to Mercedes in 2013 or 2012. Was it 2012?
So the question would be: who did Perez partner at McLaren?
Jensen Button.
It was Jensen Button.
JB. Yeah, JB.
So you can't have had Lewis and Jensen and Sergio all in the same car. So Lewis must have gone by then. He must have gone to Mercedes.
Lewis went to Mercedes 2013. So yeah, Sergio's season at McLaren was 2013.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So he came in to replace Lewis and partner
He
Jensen.
did.
So it was an incredibly tough act to follow Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah.
But equally, Jensen was a great driver. Well, no, I don't want to say it like that. He's not dead. He is a great driver.
Yeah.
So it was too much too soon for him. And of course, he ended up then back at what was Force India at the time, that's been through its various things. And he's been there basically throughout. And he's always put in some really solid results. I mean, Christ, he won a race last year in the Racing Point.
Yeah, he did. He seized his moment, and I tell you what, I mean, I was ecstatic for the man. I was absolutely delighted that that he was, that he was right up there. He's kind of always, I kind of felt like he's always threatened to pull out a result like that.
Yeah,
And he goes and does it. I mean, let's not forget. I mean, last season he finished 4th overall in the Drivers' Championship. And that's bearing in mind you've got Mercedes up there and Red Bull. He's then beat off the Ferraris, which they had a shit season. Let's not forget they had a crap season. But that midfield was incredibly close, and he still managed to drag out enough of a result to hold himself ahead of the rest of the field.
It's true, but I think he's gonna be a David Coulthard. He's gonna always be the bridesmaid. He's never gonna be the bride. I see him being a really solid number 2. I see him perhaps even at some point in the not too distant future being runner up in the Drivers' Championship. I don't think he's ever gonna take a title home of his own.
No, I don't think he will. But
hey, that's what Red Bull wanted, though.
Yeah, that is what Red Bull wanted, and do you know what? Sergio, I know he's at one point everyone was touting him as a future world champion based on a few drives, but I think he can be very happy with where he's at. You know, I mean, there was times when it looked like he might not even be on the bloody grid.
Yeah.
Let's be real. Like, I mean, Force India, when they had all of that fraud stuff going on with Vijay Mallya and that team could have gone. That team, you know, could have folded. But it was him that instigated the legal court case. So he basically forced Vijay Mallya's hand and forced them into receivership, so as the team could be sold. And in essence, he's a bit of a hero, really, because he's ended up saving all those people's jobs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really, like, I see why the team, like the employees of the team, hold him in such high regard, because he's essentially saved their livelihoods. Yeah, I think he can be justly proud of that.
He's a good guy. He is a good guy. I mean, he wasn't that long. He flew back to Mexico because there was, I can't remember what it was, but there was a national emergency in Mexico some point last year. Might have been COVID related. No, his family farm got attacked. Do you remember that? It was last year.
Vaguely.
Yeah, his family farm was attacked, and there was talk of people being in there with shotguns, and one of his family members was shot or injured or something, and he flew back home. It was all really bizarre. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. But anyway, I'm not going to dive into that. That's going to be too much of a depressing topic. I do have a game I want to play with you, though.
Okay.
It's called Who is a Future World Champion on this current grid?
Okay.
So you know the grid as well as I do. You could name all the drivers in all the cars. I'm only thinking about the current F1 paddock. I'm not talking about reserve drivers. I'm not talking about the F2 or anything coming up. Just current number 1 and number 2 drivers who has the potential or will be a future world champion.
Well, I mean, I think the natural choice right now, obviously Max Verstappen.
Mm-hmm.
I think we would struggle to find anyone who would disagree with that.
Yeah,
as
I think
much
so.
as there's haters out there, yeah, Verstappen most definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think because people were a bit concerned whether or not his star was kind of fading, but I think this season's proved it's not, and it's only growing. I would say Lando Norris is in with a shout.
Yeah, I think so as well.
I think give him the right machinery with the right team around him, and he will bring home the goods. I mean, he's already pulled out some stunning results for McLaren with a couple of podiums.
Yeah.
You see, it's weird to think, isn't it? At one point, we're all going, "Oh, do you know what?" When he was in the Williams, Valtteri Bottas, oh my God, he's going to be amazing. The next flying Finn. He's firmly gone. I'm saying now he's past his prime. He will be a good team leader for a midfield team. But he won't be more than that.
I agree.
See, part of me, so part of me still wants to say Danny Rick, but do you know what? I just don't see it now. I don't know if your opinion's different on that, but I think his chance has come and gone.
I mean, it's a really difficult one because, you know, form is temporary, class is permanent.
It is. I mean, if you go on class every day of the week. Every day of the week.
No, absolutely. I think it will come down to, for Danny Rick, it will come down to how he adapts to the 2022 cars and the rule changes that come in. That will make or break him, because we've seen this with drivers in the past. Great drivers have been through big rule changes and have not come out the other side very well.
No, they've not. No. I'm going to throw another name in the hat.
Go on then.
Charles Leclerc.
Yeah. So it was actually, Charles Leclerc was one of the ones that made me want to ask you this question, because I equally see it. I'm not sure if it will happen at Ferrari, because Ferrari have sort of lost their way a little bit over the past few years. So I'm not...
Do you know, they the last 2 years, I would say that they've been in complete disarray since... it pains me to say it, but since Fernando Alonso had his title challenge in, 2012?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that.
They've kind of never felt... to me, it's never felt like they've truly been in control of what they're doing or where they're going. They seem to chop and change all the time with the management structure,
Yeah.
and it, I don't think they. Bearing in mind, F1 is very much you have to work over a good period of time as a team to grind out a good design, a good philosophy, and an ethos, so to speak. I don't think they're allowing their management teams enough time to instill that.
Mate,
And
you're spot on. Absolutely spot on.
and even now, Binotto, like I love the guy. He is fantastic. He's a great leader. But then there's been other management changes below him in different areas of the team, and I just kind of still think chopping and changing in a knee-jerk reaction isn't just going to solve your problems. That's not, you know, you you've got to give things time. As painful as it is, you've got to give things time,
Yeah.
and it's not working. It's not working for him. And I like you say, I don't think Charles Leclerc is going to win title at Ferrari.
Yeah.
I don't think Ferrari have got it in them, and it's weird to say that about Ferrari, the most legendary team on the grid. I don't think they've got it. I just they've lost that. I, I I don't know what it was, but Montezemolo, Luca de Montezemolo, who took over, obviously, he had that kind of, I don't want to say arrogance, but he was a man who knew what he wanted and would do anything to get it. Kind of like Bernie Ecclestone.
Yeah.
They are gentlemen who know what they want, and they will place a path to get to where they want to be. And I don't think we've really seen that since he's gone.
No, I think you're right, and you're absolutely spot on with what you say about that changing management and changing leadership. I've seen this in my own work career when I've moved posts into leadership positions or new leaders have come in my teams. It takes a while to warm up to them, to get used to them, to understand what they're about, what their values are, how to work with them. That could take 6 months. And actually, that's still only just to get the initial understanding. So that continued developed relationship takes years to form into the type of partnerships that we see, like Niki Lauda and Toto at Mercedes, leading Lewis and Nico, and Jean Todt and Michael Schumacher with oh God, who's the big guy?
Ferrari.
Yeah, but it was Ferrari. But who else was there? It was Jean Todt and
you had Ross Brawn
Ross
as well.
Brawn. Ross Brawn, exactly who I was thinking of. And even to some degree, Flavio Briatore at Renault in their key years. Those kind of real leadership characters, it takes a while to cement. They don't come in on a Monday and by Friday all your problems are fixed. You do have to persevere. That might mean a year of pain. But you go through that year of pain to get to the other side. It was always... So again, being a Lewis fan, when he left McLaren to go to Mercedes, it was always a bold move, and that Mercedes was a midfield car at best, perhaps a slightly competitive midfield car, but a midfield car at best. Everyone thought it was a really odd move, and I had made a really firm assumption that he had done that on the basis of the strength of their hybrid era projections, and they clearly were abandoning the V8 and V10 era cars and saying, listen, we're not going to put a penny into this. It'll be as competitive as it is. Get on board, because next year we'll have a car that'll be a world beater. And fuck me, they were right. They were absolutely right.
By quite some margin as well.
Exactly.
It's one of those. I mean, you could say though that by and large, like a lot of that work up to 2012 put in to cement that progression.
I know what you're going to say.
It came from that traditional partnership of, let's not forget, one of the most dominant periods, that Schumacher-Brawn partnership again.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say it.
and it really did lay a foundation. And the Mercedes employees say themselves, like, bringing in a former world champion. I mean, they've said it about Sebastian Vettel this year at Aston Martin.
Yeah.
Bringing in that world champion into the team, it changes how they go about things. They've got very particular ways that they want to do things, and by and large, it always works out for the best. Aston Martin are improving. They're getting there, but this season's a write-off, frankly.
Yeah.
I think most of the teams are feeling that way. Yeah, it's one of those. So, I mean, I'm excited to see what we get next year, and who's going to adapt the best. I will say that I think someone who will actually do quite well under the new regulations with the new aero being sort of a classic feel. Fernando Alonso, because
okay.
I'm basing this on he made his F1 debut back when aero was a bit simpler. He came in with Minardi 2001, shit car. Don't get me wrong, but he dragged some results out of that Minardi, and it's some great qualifying results as well. I think Tarso Marquez, God rest his soul. Poor guy, he never stood a chance.
No,
But Alonso, I think will do very well next year because it's almost a throwback to that era, that kind of thing. I would love Kimi to stay on another year, but do you know what? I think this might be Kimi's last year.
Oh, interesting. So I don't necessarily.
Yeah, I think it will be.
I think he's proven this year that he's still got a lot to offer. I mean, he was racing with Sebastian for that last points place at Austria, and there's a video been doing the rounds on YouTube for some time about his first lap at Portimao, the Portuguese track last year, where he just decimated about 7 or 8 drivers in one lap.
That start is the best start I've ever seen. That was an incredible opening lap.
He still got it.
I mean, what I will say is as well, the Alfa Romeo is a poor car at this moment in time. It's a poor car, but if it's on the soft compound of tyres at the beginning of a race, it does get the heat into the tyres quicker than some of the other cars. Obviously, the knock-on effect of that is they go off a lot quicker. But like for the start of the races, the Alfa Romeo always seems to have a bit more bite than the cars around it. I don't know what they do. I don't know whether it's the tyre blankets or the preparation, or if it is just the way the car is on the tyres. But what do you make of Giovinazzi? I'm just going to sidetrack and sidestep to Kimi's teammate, because I was reading an article, and I will try and get this article up. So, and this comes from the Alfa Romeo employees, and they're saying that Antonio Giovinazzi has been making waves.
Oh yes.
Very interesting. It's a very good read, and it was actually broadcast. This is from the 27th of May this year. Mm-hmm. This is on the official Formula One website. There's an actual whole thing, and it was entitled, and this is what caught my eye: how Antonio Giovinazzi is quietly making waves at Alfa Romeo. And I was kind of sitting there thinking, but I haven't seen anything fantastic from him. Like it's. I don't know about you, but I kind of feel is he a driver that should be on the F1 grid? Is kind of what I'm getting at. When you've got other Ferrari Academy drivers such as Callum Eilert, Robert Schwartzman, who, these are exciting talents.
They are
exciting drivers. Should he be on the F1 grid? Bear in mind, Giovinazzi is now 27 years old.
Yeah,
he's not a young gun. Anyone else that's kind of mid-career. That's well, some people it's end of career, but
So this is a really interesting argument. So had you have asked me this question a year ago, I would have said that there was enough being shown from Giovinazzi to show that there's some good raw material for a handy driver in the future. Not necessarily a Formula One world champion, and not necessarily a runner-up, but the sort of guy that could nick in and grab a podium here and there and have a decent career.
But has he moved on from that though? Has he shown he's just plateaued, in my opinion.
So I'm not seeing that development that I would be hoping from him, but I have to measure that slightly because I don't think you're going to be able to see much of that development in what is a very satisfactory car. The challenge, of course, will always be that he's being outperformed fairly regularly by Kimi Raikkonen, a man getting on for twice his age, but equally a former world champion. Let's not forget, he's no slouch, is our Kimi.
Yeah,
The
if you look at, I mean, just for comparison, so you look at the results between Kimi and Giovinazzi.
Yeah.
This just taking this season, so just this part of the season that we've reached, they've been a lot closer together this season. A lot closer. I mean, Bahrain, Kimi 11th, Giovinazzi 12th. Imola, Kimi 13th, Giovinazzi 14th. I'm only going to compare the ones where they've actually finished a race.
For the best.
Portugal, Kimi retired, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Monaco, Kimi 12th, Giovinazzi did struggle there, 15th. Was that Monaco? No, that was Spain, sorry. Monaco, Kimi 11th, Giovinazzi 10th. And then it was reversed for Baku, where Kimi picks up a point. And then Giovinazzi had the legs on him at France as well. Giovinazzi finished 15th, Kimi 17th. I mean, that just shows how poor the car is. But, I suppose then Kimi's bounced back last race with, like you say, just on the fringes of points with P11, and Giovinazzi was kind of nowhere, P15. They're closer than they have been. But
they are, but you can see that consistency much more from Kimi. 10th, 11th. Yes. Oh, I've had a bad race. I'm down in 12th. Whereas Giovinazzi's going 17th, 15th, 11th, 10th. So it's a bit of a different one. I think the argument for replacing Giovinazzi comes back to what we were saying earlier about those young drivers and whether they're ready mentally in a maturity standpoint to take that drive. Because for raw talent and what I've seen and the opportunity, I'd have Callum Ilott in that car over Giovinazzi any day of the week. Yeah. But is Callum Ilott mentally ready, or is he going to get into a car like that, be like a kid in a sweet shop and end up binning it for the next 4 races and costing the team millions of pounds in rebuilding the car? And that's what they don't want. Yeah. Whereas the only big crash I ever remember Gio having was that one at Spa last year.
Well, that's not strictly true though.
Okay.
So if you take... So Giovinazzi actually made his debut for Sauber. He deputised for a couple of races at Sauber, and he trashed the car straight away at Shanghai. That's where he made his debut.
Well, that sort of reinforces the don't get a young kid in your car straight away when you could have an old hand.
It does. So...
In fact,
it is an interesting one.
I'm going to sidebar us slightly here because I remember Giovinazzi in the Sauber. Wasn't he in the Sauber because Pascal Wehrlein couldn't drive for some reason? And the reason I want to pick that up is I want to ask, where the fuck is Pascal Wehrlein? Because I thought he showed a huge amount of promise and then he lost his drive and disappeared.
Yeah, so it's interesting you mention this because obviously this goes back to this was like Manor were in existence. Pascal Wehrlein's now Formula E. He's not very consistent. He's all over the place. 1 minute he's on pole, the next he's in 15th. He's kind of slipped into a bit of obscurity. I completely agree. And I believe it was, I'm just going back to the 2017 season. Yeah, so Pascal Wehrlein withdrew at the beginning for the opening 2 races. He withdrew from running. I'm not entirely sure why.
Was that a license issue? Did he have a problem with his license?
Let's have a look. Just having a look at his history.
Oh, no. He was forced to miss the first test in Barcelona due to an injury he sustained when competing in the Race of Champions in Rock. So Gio sat in for him, and then he was fit to take part in the Australian, but withdrew after participating in the first 2 practice sessions, with Gio replacing him for the rest of the weekend.
And then he stayed on for another race weekend, which is a bit peculiar.
Yeah,
peculiar, very peculiar. But yeah, Pascal Wehrlein, Now you see, I rated Pascal.
Yeah.
I rated him very highly, especially when he was dragging out results in the manor.
Mm.
Bearing in mind that car was,
Dog
uh, uh,
shit.
it was dog. Yeah, it was dog shit. I mean, he drove the manor what 2016 was that was the one that they titled Dream Machine, wasn't it? The Dream Machine. That's what.
Might
It,
be.
and he scored that stunning point at Austria where he was legitimately on the pace in
Mm.
a shit car.
Yeah.
Um, he had a massive falling out with because he was Mercedes backed. He was part of the Mercedes, backed program.
Hmm.
He had a monumental falling out with Mercedes after his season with Sauber. So he basically Mercedes didn't get him another. They basically didn't pay for him to have another drive in Formula One because there wasn't really a legitimate seat that they could put him into. Because obviously Sauber had just transitioned hands into someone else, yeah, whoever it is that oversees it. Obviously Alfa Romeo.
Uh,
So he didn't stay on because technically Alfa Romeo is linked to Ferrari. So
yeah.
Mercedes are not going to pay for him to drive in pretty much at the time their arch rival's car.
Yeah.
Um, he had a bit of a falling out with them, although Mercedes did send him back to DTM,
Yes.
in the factory car, and it didn't go as well as his 2015 season where he was the title winner. Um, he finished eighth in DTM in 2018. And they had a massive falling out because basically he only wanted to sit out of F1 for a year, and then he wanted to go. He wanted guarantees that he was going to be back on the grid for 2019. Ultimately, that didn't happen. Um, he got a bit. In fairness to him, he got very pig-headed. He done a bit of a Christian Albers. Kind of felt he was a bit more important than he should have been. And Mercedes severed ties. They basically were, well, we've not got a seat to put you in, and you've had a poor season in DTM. We're not gonna basically pay for you to go back to Formula One,
Mm.
because there's nowhere for you to go. And it was a bit of a bitter thing. So they severed ties, and he ended up driving for Mahindra in Formula E. So he basically done no running for the entire first half of 28. What was that? No, so he went from DTM straight into Formula E. Uh, he was
Mm.
always in the tail end of the points, but never spectacular. I mean, here's his Formula E results to date. So, the first season, 12th overall with 58 points. Second season, 18th overall with just 14 points. He had a falling out with the management at Mahindra and severed ties with Mahindra. So they basically kicked him to the curb. So he's got a bit of form here for his attitude.
Okay.
And then he's been picked up by, of all people, this stunned me. So Porsche picked him up.
Oh, what for the endurance series?
No, for Formula E. So
Ah.
he's in the Porsche Formula E team, and he looks set to have his best season yet. That said, he's still only 9th overall in the driver standings. So since
Hmm.
since his time with the Mercedes program and his dabblings with Formula One, he's kind of been the maker of his own demise, and that's a shame because there's a lot of talent there. But he's just hasn't used it in the right way.
Yeah, so that is a shame. I had some relatively high hopes for him. I thought he was a handy driver, but we know firsthand that temperament and mentality is important as actually being a good driver. And I'm gonna say a name here that I think is right in my mind. If it is, you'll immediately react to it and know exactly what I'm talking about. Dan Ticktum.
Yeah.
So
Where do
if
we begin with him?
well, if memory serves, Tictum was a junior Red Bull program driver,
Correct. Yep.
and there was an incident in an F2 or an F3 race that he took offence at, so then crashed his opposing driver off the circuit in a relatively dangerous fashion, as any high-speed motorsports crash is, completely on purpose, and then had
Yes.
to sit out and was banned from driving for the next 12 to 18 months or so.
Yes. Correct.
I mean,
Yeah,
who the
that
fuck does that?
yeah. It was. I think it was his own teammate. I'm sure it was his own teammate he'd done this to.
Was it really?
And do you know what? Do you know what? It's someone we spoke about earlier tonight. Ricky Collard.
Was it Ricky?
It was Ricky. Yeah, it was
Jesus.
Ricky Collard. So here we go. So in 2015, so this is 6 years ago now. So 2015, Tictum graduated to the MSA Formula with Fortec Motorsport. For those of you that don't know Fortec Motorsport, they've been around for years in the junior categories in the UK. Really successful team. So he had led the early rounds of the championship. He'd like taken a couple of victories and everything, which was pretty like people were starting to take note. Um, but then it was really weird. His season was weird because all of a sudden that pace just evaporated, and he fell behind Lando Norris. And here's a name that I didn't know raced in the UK: Colton Herter. Um, uh, yeah, Colton Herter, who's now IndyCar.
Okay.
He basically, the second last race of the season, got involved in an incident where he purposely overtook several cars whilst under a safety car to purposely crash into rival Ricky Collard.
Jesus.
Subsequently, he received a 2-year ban from motorsport, of which 1 year was suspended. So he was kind of on a probation after the first year, so to speak. Yeah, because of that, he ended up finishing. They still classified him in the standings, despite the ban. They still classified him in the standings as 6th overall and second in the rookie category.
Wow. Okay.
This guy. This is a guy that. Did you see much of Formula 2 last year?
Bits of it, more than I have done in most years, if I'm honest.
So basically, he returns a year on, 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And bearing in mind, obviously, the way when his ban started, it was kind of end of season. So he's returned for essentially a one-off race in the European Formula 3 Championship at Carlin.
Yeah.
And the Autumn Trophy here in the UK that we did with Formula 3. We will have to have a discussion about British Formula 3 and its terrible demise. But he finished second and placed 4th in that autumn series. It's a weird return to sort of racing. I mean, he even got a seat in the Macau Grand Prix, so people just willingly welcomed him back.
There has to be a clear financial element in that somewhere, because you don't welcome back someone with that kind of a history with open arms in the way that people did.
No. What pisses me off even more is a guy like this is also part of the Williams Driver Academy.
Oh, he's Williams
program.
Driver Academy now, is he?
Yes, he is. Yeah, so he obviously lost the Red Bull one following the ban and everything else.
Yeah.
So anyway, he then goes on to compete in the Formula 3 World Cup in 2017, which is a one-off race at the Macau Grand Prix, and he qualified 6th and finished 8th in the qualifying race, and then claimed victory somewhere in there as well. So yeah, he then got a full-time seat in the FIA European Formula 3, where I think he was teammates to Mick Schumacher. That's where he got absolutely decimated by Mick Schumacher in the second half of the season. So again, Tictum comes out the blocks blindingly fast for the first part of the season, and his pace just evaporates for the second half, which he's got a really good habit of doing. I'm looking at his stats for a lot of his seasons. First half of the season, he's winning. Second half of the season, nothing. Literally nothing. He doesn't improve, which is just bizarre. But yeah, he got destroyed in Formula 3 by Mick Schumacher, and he lost his shit. I don't know if you saw some of his press releases that he made in there. He was basically accusing him of foul play and flouting rules and all this kind of shit.
So he's a bad loser to boot.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. So yeah, he wasn't happy. Wasn't happy at all. And then he comes to Formula 2, and he's been a bit of a pissy little shit, if I'm being honest. And apologies to anyone who's a Tictum fan, but he has been a pissy little shit. And he's basically...
Now,
if it's not going his way, he's complaining and all this kind of shit. And yeah,
I'm fairly sure I overheard a radio message in a race last year. So, bearing in mind this guy's ban was 2015, there was a radio
yes,
message last year where he openly threatened or suggested to his team that he was going to crash into someone if he did something like that again. And whilst that's never a cool thing to say at the best of times, when you have form, when you have done this and have been banned for this sort of shit, do you know what? Keep your mouth shut.
yes. And you are correct. He did. They sort of skirt over it in his thing, in like all of his sort of history. They always skirt over that, but he did. He come out and said, "Oh, I'm going to go and crash into this guy," and it's just like, have you really just said that? Bearing in mind you've already been suspended and banned for this sort of shit. You come out and say it again.
It was something very specific, though, wasn't it? It was something like, if he does that to me again, I'm going to take him out of the race. Or if he tries that with me again, I'll have him, I'll take him out or something. It wasn't just an open, I'll crash into him, because I suspect he would have been pulled up for that. But the intent was so obvious and clear, he made no intent to hide it.
Yeah. I think that was... Now, it's one of... Because he was in a bit of a fight with 3 drivers. I think they're all still racing in Formula 2.
Was it at Silverstone? Was it the Silverstone race?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's got to be around that point in the season. Was it Gangyo Zhou? Or I probably butchered his name and I apologise.
Oh, Ganyu Zhao, the Renault development driver.
Yeah, him. I mean, it could have been Theo Pucher or Marcus Armstrong because he was having a good fight with them that season.
I have a feeling it might have been Grand Uzo and Callum Ilott was running up there at the same time, and it was coming through the last complex, the last few corners onto the new pit straight. Yes, I still call it the new pit straight because I remember old school Silverstone. And I'm sure there was a coming together there, potentially after a safety car or a virtual safety car.
Yes. Yeah. I'm trying to see where it is.
Oh, well, hang on. I found an Autosport article where he's claimed it was taken out of context. Where are we?
Yes. Okay.
Here we go. Tickton was heard fuming over the radio after claiming he nearly had a collision with Haas Formula One junior Louis Delatraz when battling for position. Next time that... it's all bleeped out, I presume fucker or something, pulls a kamikaze move like that, I'm going to crash with him. I tell you that, is what Tickton said to his engineer. I will never give him that much respect ever again. And so he's then had to go on record and say, I wanted to clarify that one of my radio messages has been taken out of context. I gave a lot of space. Had I not done, we would have come together. In no way did I mean I wanted to crash with him. Well, you can see why people would think you might want to crash with him, Dan, you bellend. If you make a statement that says, if he does that again, I'm going to crash with him.
Yeah. You can't just come out and say those things without there being almost some form of repercussions. That's ridiculous.
Not when you've got this kind of history and background with it as well. It's just unreal. If the guy wants to go anywhere in his career, he needs to get some decent PR support. He needs to get in touch with Lewis and get the PR guys that he had back in the day, because they clearly worked for him.
But that was Simon Cowell's management.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I will say. Not that I'm a big fan of redirecting any potential viewers to other people's streams, but there are some really good stuff out there. If anyone is interested, Josh Revell does a great video called What the Fuck Happened to Dan Ticktum. It is, 10, 11 minutes long? It's a good 10 or 11 minute watch. I'd highly recommend, if anyone wants to know what's going on with Dan Ticktum in his career, where he's been, why it's happened, go and give Josh's video a watch.
Do you know what? I'll even link that in the description below the video, because I've seen that. And yeah, it is fantastic to watch. He does some really good coverage, actually. I'd highly advise actually just checking out his content.
Yeah.
Because there's some drivers currently in motorsport that people will know, and they have found their way onto his channel, whether that be for good reasons or bad reasons. Yeah, it's entertainment at its finest.
Well, rightly or wrongly, I always think that Josh Revell was one of the driving forces that made good old Lord Rags as important as he was.
Oh, yeah, he's got his own merchandise line for Lord Rags, hasn't he?
Has he really?
Yeah, I don't know if you see,
Brilliant.
you can get T-shirts and stuff with all this on. It's it's remarkable, absolutely remarkable. Um,
Oh.
who else have we got to sort of touch on?
What,
No,
on
that
the
sounds
current
really weird.
grid?
That sounds really weird, and
Who
I
else should we touch?
apologise. Yeah, yeah, yeah. As my mum said, don't touch if you can't afford it. And um, yeah,
Well, I tell you
I
what. So if we're talking about the current grid, there
yes,
is at least four. No, there's five drivers
okay,
actually.
okay.
I think are with a shout.
Okay. Well, let me first of all ask. So far this season, who is your standout driver of the season?
Standout driver of the season so far.
So far, yeah. I've got potentially two candidates. One in
It's
particular, but two in my mind.
it's a really difficult one actually because my mind tells me that the standout drivers are the ones that are outperforming their car or outperforming their teammate. And on that basis, Lando Norris and Mick Schumacher would both be well up there. I would be
Yeah.
tempted to give it to Charles Leclerc on the basis that, again, I think he's outperforming a fairly so Ferrari.
He's had a couple of fastest laps as well this season, let's not forget.
He has indeed. But the other outside shout for me would be Yuki Tsunoda, who he didn't have the best of times at Austria, but on the whole, in his debut season, I think he's looked pretty handy.
He's got. Do you know what? And this is something that he reminds me in parts of Kamui Kobayashi. 'Cause,
I knew you were going to say
there's,
Kobayashi.
there's there's something about the way, and I don't know why, but it seems to be a pattern with Japanese drivers. But they, when it comes to overtaking, will banzai it up the inside. You know, and they like. How many times did we see Kobayashi launching it up the inside and pulling off these audacious moves? I mean, some of them went wrong. Let's not forget.
Yes, they did.
know,
Yes, they
some
did.
of them went. Some of them went catastrophically wrong. But Sonoda has got that about him. But Kamui was kind of more humble. Yuki, I think he sets himself a very high bar. He's never happy. He's always like, even when he finished, what did he finish in Baku? P7 in Baku, his best result. And yet, after the race, he still said he could have achieved more.
Yeah.
And you just, I think that will stand him in good stead for the future, as long as the Red Bull driver program doesn't sink its teeth into him too much. Because we've seen this before, and then they just become deflated shells of them former selves.
Yeah. Well, I mean, God, there's Danny Kvyat, Pierre Gasly, Alex Albon. You know, take your pick. It's too early.
Yeah, Jean-Eric Verne stands out.
Yeah. Well, Sebastian Bourdais, for that matter, then.
Sebastian Bourdais, Buemi.
Yeah.
I mean, he was widely tipped to go into the Red Bull seat.
Yeah.
That never happened. God, who else did we have?
Well, it was
Jamie Al-Jaswari.
Yeah, there was Al-Jaswari.
who's now the music DJ, just for anyone out there.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Who was the New Zealander?
Oh, Brendan Hartley.
Brendan Hartley, thank you. Yeah.
I was devastated for him. I had such high hopes. He was coming off the back of this amazing stint in World Endurance. And he just never clicked. He just never picked up that car in the same way that his teammate did, and ultimately got destroyed. I think he was at one point lauded the king of P11, because did he not have a number of P11 finishes?
I think he did.
He was always on the fringes, but never quite there.
Yeah.
Was that 2019?
No, it's got to be further back than that, surely.
Is it? No, yeah, it's got to be what 2018.
I actually think 2014 to 2016, somewhere around about there. But I'm getting old now, so my memory of the passage of time is failing.
2018. Here we go. 2018. So Brendan Hartley picked up 4 points that season. Finished 19th out of 20 in the standings. The only person lower than him was Sergei Sirotkin.
Oh God!
Yeah,
That's a name I want to forget.
Yeah, but yeah, Brendan Hartley. He finished. He only finished P11 actually twice. So yeah. So I mean, to be honest, I mean these guys getting outscored by Marcus Ericsson. I mean that's.
And you see, Marcus Ericsson is one of the drivers that I really disliked, almost actively disliked.
Yeah. I was not a fan. I was not sold on him. He didn't really achieve anything in junior categories.
Yeah. Full-on pay driver that never really had the skill or requirements to be there.
Yeah. Yeah. The only titles he won was his first single-seater experience, the Formula BMW UK Championship.
Ooh.
Yeah, he won that back in 2007. And then he won the Japanese Formula 3 series in 2009 and never won a title again. He's currently 7th in IndyCar standings, just saying.
I did spot that. But again, pissing off all the Americans that might be listening, it's just going round and round in circles.
Yeah, I mean, he won at Detroit. I mean, that was largely due to an accident for someone else. So, is it a legitimate result? Yeah. I mean, when you finish behind Marcus Ericsson, though, that's
the writing on the wall.
Lance Stroll finished behind him that season. He's still on the F1 grid.
But you see,
Stroll Racing,
I have very strong opinions on Lance Stroll. He's pulled off a couple of okay moves, but again, I don't think he warrants a place on the grid. I think there are better drivers than Lance Stroll out there not being given a chance because he's got a lot of money behind him.
Yeah, he has. And to be honest, he's in the position of power now, and we're not going to see that change for quite some time. I mean, Lance Stroll, he's was he 24, something like that? He's 22. So yeah, I'm over egging it. He's fucking young. Yeah, he's not going anywhere.
God.
Yeah, 22. Yeah. He's not going anywhere for some time, and it's a bit of a shame.
I think so. I think so because, like I say, I think there are better options out there. But I'm going to move on from the depressing because I'm conscious we've been chatting for a long old while, and we probably need to think about wrapping this up. I have a big question for you to finish.
Oh God! Okay, go on.
Mick Schumacher.
Yes.
Is he here as an also-ran? Is he here on the back of his dad's reputation? Or has he got something about him? What's your opinion?
Okay. Honest opinion. I think he's got something about him. I think he handles himself with a certain grace. I think a lot of drivers, if they'd come through with a father such as his, would be a lot more big-headed and pig-headed as to where they should and shouldn't be. But he seems to have come in with the support of his mum, Karina Schumacher, and I think he's handled himself very well. With all the pressure that comes with it, he's not rushed himself. He's not pushed himself to just jump up the ladder. He's always taken that extra season, if he needs it, to round himself out. And he's been very similar to his dad. He's been quite methodical about the way he goes about things. You take his Formula 4 season. That first season when he made his debut in single seaters back in 2015, there were a lot of question marks left there because he finished 10th overall in the season and didn't really achieve any standout races. He won a race, but it wasn't like a standout. Oh my God, look at this guy! He's going to be like his dad, you know. But then he stayed on for another season, and in doing so, he improved vastly. And he finished runner-up that season in the standings. But like his race performances and everything just went up tenfold. And I think he's surrounded himself with the right people as well. He's been part of the Prema team all through the junior categories.
Okay.
So his second season was his beginning of a relationship with the Prema power team, as they call themselves. And that was in Formula 4. He stayed with them into Formula 3, where the first season, again, there was a lot of question marks, 12th overall at the end of the season, with just one podium finish out of 30 races. You kind of think, oh, okay, maybe that's his limit, his talent limit has reached. He stayed on for another season and wins the title. He took fucking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Took suddenly just the second half of the season, whatever it is, he just settled and took 8 race wins and 3 second places. Won the title, and he's then done the same in Formula 2. There's a bit of a pattern, really.
There is.
The first season is always a bit meh. Like, so the first season in Formula 2, he took 1 win, and that was his only podium all season. And he finished 12th overall. But then the second season goes and wins the title. I think he's definitely got some talent. And I like that he's not letting because Nikita Mazepin is a powerful personality. Rightly or wrongly, he is, and you know, there's a lot of things that Nikita has done off track as well that are very questionable.
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
I
don't think I want to open that can of worms tonight, but
No.
for anyone who knows, yes, and it's despicable.
It is absolutely despicable. But with everything that's gone on, whenever he's been in the spotlight, Mick has handled himself. I genuinely believe that he's handled himself very professionally, very maturely. You know, and it's quite clear to see that the love for his dad and everything is the main driving force behind him doing what he does. There was an Instagram post, I think Formula One, the actual Formula One Instagram, posted up a picture, and it was basically a question to all the fans: who is your F1 hero? And Mick Schumacher replied to that, and he said, "My dad," with a love heart. And I just thought, do you know what? That says a lot about this guy. Like, he absolutely adores his dad.
Yeah.
I legitimately think he is there with talent. He's not rushed himself. Like, a lot of drivers would have just one season in each formula, bosh, Formula One, let's go.
Yeah.
He's taken his time to understand the series that he's in, and he's legitimately wanted to progress on merit via results than just using his dad's name. And not every driver would have done that. I rate him. I think he'll be one for the future. You can't really tell at the moment in the dog shit car, but compared to his benchmark, which is his teammate, he's destroying Nikita.
Yes, that's true.
I know Nikita finished ahead of him at Monaco. However, I would like to say on that note that obviously at one point Mick was 30 seconds ahead of Nikita, had something go on, had to pit, came out and was 30 seconds behind Nikita, and across the line he was right with him again.
Yeah.
So he's lost a minute's worth of time and has still actually caught back up to his teammate, which doesn't look good for Nikita, but he's not going anywhere with the money. But I don't know. Are your thoughts different? I think he's there legitimately, but I don't know if you have a more controversial opinion than me.
When have you ever known me to have a controversial opinion? So, interestingly, in another one of those very rare occasions, we are in complete agreement. I think he is there on his own merits. I think he. Don't get me wrong. I'm gonna readjust what I said. He's there partly on merit by his family name. You know,
Yes.
people will have
Yeah.
given him and his cousin David, isn't it, Ralph's son? They
Oh
both
yes.
will have got a buy-in, partly because of the money behind them from their dads, and partly because of their name. That's got their foot in the door. But for Mick, certainly, I don't know a great deal about David and how his career's going. But for Mick, certainly, he has progressed up the ranks using his own merit, his own performance, and his own skill and talent. And I completely agree with what you're saying. Is season one, he's there or thereabouts, but he's nothing special. He looks like he might be a bit of a flash in the pan. And then actually, what he's doing is he's constantly improving, he's learning, he's bettering himself. And then the next season, he blows him out of the water. Don't expect to see that in F1. he's he's
No.
he's not world champion next year in waiting. I very much doubt that. But yeah, I think he's got a decent career ahead of him, and the day will come, almost certainly, where he will end up in the Scarlet Red of Ferrari.
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to happen. I mean, I'm glad you actually brought us on this because there was actually something I wanted to bring up about Mick. Reading up and talking to a few people that are working in the paddock, there are grumblings in the paddock that he's going to be moved to Alfa Romeo next season. That is the rumor. So it's an interesting one because who the hell would he replace at Alfa Romeo?
So I actually heard this
Hmm,
rumor starting last year. So there was a lot
yeah.
of discussion about whether he was going to go to Alpha or Haas, and it was right up until the sort of the deadline moment. It was announced he was going to Haas when it was felt he was going to go to Alpha. What no one was ever being clear on was whether that was Gio stepping down or contract not being renewed or Kimi retiring.
Hmm,
Either, considering Alpha's current position, either are very good, very strong possibilities. And there's an argument. We've made this same argument ourselves here tonight about keeping that stability in a team at the management level. There is something to be said about it at drivers as well. Haas
yes.
had some okay times with Kevin Magnussen and Roman Grosjean, but they were never going to be world champions with that driver lineup and the car as it was. Um,
No.
Equally, they're not going to be world champions with Nikita Mazepin and Mick Schumacher and the car as it is now. But my suspicion is Mazepin's financial backing from Uralkai and similar brings in more than probably Grosjean and Magnussen combined. So there's more
Yeah.
money coming into the team to reinvest in the car going forward. So they're trying to play the long game.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Uh, the thing is, like the way I see it. So if Mick did move to Alpha, then let's go on the proviso that Kimi comes out and says, "Yep, I'm retiring. My time in F1's done,"
Hmm.
and swans off to have another ice cream. Um, if that happens, I like, and Mick goes to Alpha. I don't see Giovinazzi as a team leader, and he would be the de facto team leader. I just that would worry me. That would worry me. I think if Mick was to go to Alpha, he would be better placed to slot in alongside Kimi, even just for a season.
So I would tend to agree with you. I think Kimi would be a much better mentor and teammate and leader for Mick to work with. I don't see it happening. I think by time
No,
Mick is ready for that step into the bigger, more powerful car, Kimi will already be stepping away.
yeah, I mean, let's be real. The time's got to come for Kimi, as
Oh yeah.
much as it pains us, because he is a legend, and he's one of those rare personalities of the grid, and yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see because I mean, Ferrari. I mean, it's not like Ferrari haven't got youngsters to pick and choose from. You know, they've got plenty in their driver academy.
Hmm.
I mean, the ones they've currently got in their academy, Marcus Armstrong, currently Formula 2, Callum Ilott, as we've already discussed, Robert
Hmm.
Schwartzman,
Yeah.
uh, and let's not forget Arthur Leclerc, Charles' younger brother.
Oh
He,
yes.
yeah, he's in there.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some more obscure ones that are in there that I question, like whoever Dino Beganovic is. That don't know him. Apparently, he's a Swede. And
Okay.
also Maya Valg, who's dual nationality female racer currently racing in Italian Formula 4.
Okay.
But that's it. That's all they've got contracted now. They've got rid of Giuliano Alesi. He's no longer part of the Ferrari Driver Academy.
Well, it's not a surprise. I mean,
No.
didn't we
Yeah.
say that Jean Alesi had to sell his Ferrari F40 in order to
Yes.
fund the continued progression because he wasn't getting the results? He was back at the grid,
Yeah.
really, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. He was. What did he pick up? A handful of podiums, if that.
Yeah.
Enzo Fittipaldi, another one that has been dropped.
He's been dropped.
He's been dropped. Enzo, yeah, Enzo Fittipaldi.
That's interesting.
Not Pietro, who made his F1 debut.
No, but Emerson is still. This is still Emerson's grandson, or one of Emerson's
Yes.
grandsons, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. Yes. So yeah, he's been dropped. And also, surprisingly, Montoya's son, Sebastian Montoya's also been dropped.
Okay.
So that's it. They're left with a very small roster now. Because I mean, they used to have people like Antonio Fuoco. Do you remember Fuoco?
Only vaguely.
I mean, he used to be pretty good hotshot in Formula 2. But yeah, I don't know. It's going off on a bit of a tangent, I guess. But they've got some. I mean, the ones that have still got are exciting talents. Two in particular, obviously Schwartzman and Eilert. They are definite future Formula One drivers. Although we have said that about people like Nick De Vries and that. Oh yeah, definitely future F1 drivers, and it never happens. But
Well, I don't know.
I think Ferrari are in a bit more of a position of power because they've technically got two junior teams under them.
Yeah, they do.
And that is a good thing to have if you're wanting to bring through the next phase of talent. I mean, look what they've done with Charles Leclerc. They've nurtured him, and now he's repaying them with his performances.
Yeah, and it's sad to say after thinking about the years of dominance they had, but Williams, not only do they not have a junior team, they could be argued as a junior team of Mercedes because they're using a Mercedes power plant. They've got a Mercedes driver in their car that we know is going to end up in that car at some point in the future. So how the mighty have fallen in that respect. But I absolutely agree. Schwartzman and Eilert are definitely F1 stars of the future. And on the note of Nick De Vries not necessarily making it to F1, am I not right in saying that he has taken some free practice sessions and he is the official Williams reserve or test driver, isn't he?
I don't know. I don't know. Because when did he win the title? Was it 2019? Would be 2019 because Mick won it last year. So yeah, 2019. If we go to Nick De Vries, let's have a look. Just a quick look.
Okay, so he's listed as a reserve driver for Mercedes, but obviously that's a shared role with Stoffel Van Dorn.
Yeah.
I could have sworn he took some free practice sessions in the Williams last year. But I don't know if they, I don't know if there's actually a statistic anywhere that would show you who's taken those, because we know various drivers have done that.
I mean, anyone else I've looked at, it's been on their wiki of when they've been test driver, like in the free practice. I don't see any listed for him. I know he had a stint. No, McLaren he had a little stint with, didn't he? Because he was part of the McLaren Junior program from 2010. Because he was in that animated series that McLaren released. Do you remember that animated series?
Tuned?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I do remember that.
Yeah, Nick De Vries was in that as the little kid with Alec. What was his name? Fucking Armstrong's character, the professor. He was in that because he was hotly tipped to sort of, come into Formula One in a blaze of glory and do this, that, and the rest, and it never happened.
I still think it will. I'm not sure when. I'm not sure where the opportunity comes from. But we know that some of the drivers on the grid are aging. There's no nice way to put that. You think Alonso's going to be there a little bit longer. I'm not so sure. I think Alonso is about to hang up those racing boots.
Well,
I think Seb could be in his last season as well.
yeah, I mean, Alonso's deal runs until the end of next season, so
Okay.
he's got that first season of the regulations
Mhm.
with Alpine, and then yeah, maybe he'll step back again or go and attempt Indy again. You know, just, he obviously he wants that Indy 500 win, so I see him just going back to that, giving it another go. But
So here's a thought.
no,
We both think Bottas is gone at the end of this season, and
yeah,
George Russell's going to get that spot.
yeah,
It's possible. It's possible that Bottas might go back to Williams. I don't think he'd want to, but Williams might say there's a seat here available for you, Sunshine. If
yeah.
that doesn't work, and as long as he pays enough money to keep Latifi comfortable, I wonder if Nick De Vries might get that Williams seat that George Russell vacates.
Oh, that's a good shout, isn't it? That's a good shout. He
Could
could
be,
well
know.
do. He could do. He could do. Oh man,
You wouldn't bet against it, would you?
no. I yeah, no. I wouldn't want to put my, worldly life on that. But yeah, it is a possibility. I mean, I'd like to see De Vries get a chance. I just hope, I hope upon hope that next year's Williams is a good car.
I wouldn't even like to guess. I think Mercedes are
No,
throwing a lot at it, and I think they'll be up there.
yeah,
Looking down the
yeah.
rest of the grid, I honestly
And
couldn't tell you who's developing next year's car well
well,
enough.
I you see, and this is what concerns me with Haas, because Haas subcontract their chassis design and their aero designs to Dallara.
Mm.
It's not in house. They're the only team that do this. And although initially that ethos, that business model worked when they first came in, I think what we've seen though is that substantial lack of just being able to persistently develop their own car,
Yeah.
because they're kind of hampered by relying on this other outside entity to do it for them. Now they're saying, and they already said that last year they hadn't even bothered with this year's car. Just literally, it was going to be to this year's specs. There's going to be nothing coming for it, and that's it. So their focus is purely on next year's car. But I don't like the idea of an external source making my chassis and that for me, because if it's shit, you're going to have a world of pain trying to rescue it. And look at them; they have had a world of pain trying to rescue it.
Yeah, but I
Uh,
think that the problem for Haas is actually double that. The chassis is absolutely a concern, but
yeah.
equally, that engine's not an in-house unit. They're a Ferrari customer getting Ferrari customer engines. So
Mm-hmm.
if we look at next year, for example, so we are 3rd of July is today's date. We are looking towards the 2022 car, which they'll be starting to test in what, March, April time next year. Maybe a bit earlier, maybe February. At this stage, not only do they not know what that chassis is going to look like, they actually don't know anything about the Ferrari engine. They don't know where the centre of gravity is going to be. They don't know what the unsprung mass of that weight is going to be over the rear springs. So they can't even give Dallara a clear steer on how to design these factors into the car in order to make it aerodynamic, wide enough. All of that stuff is going to be done lastminute.com as soon as Ferrari give them an engine to work with. And the two combined do not make for a good car that's going to be competitive.
No, no, and that's concerning. Well, more so for Mick,
Yeah.
because is he not under? He's under contract, isn't he, for a couple of seasons with Haas, from what I understand.
Well, I'd
Um,
assume so, but on the basis that he's a Ferrari young driver, I'm willing to bet that if Ferrari said he's moving to Alpha, that he would just move and they'd put Schwartzman in that car.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Ferrari hold a lot of power in what could happen. to
Mm.
be honest. We are approaching the end of an era though, with like you say, with a number of drivers. It'll be interesting to see which ones go, which ones stick around for maybe longer than they should, because there's always that thin line of staying on a bit too long. um,
Well,
yeah.
there is, and I'm conscious we should think about drawing this to an end. And normally
Yes.
I'd leave on a high. I'm going to leave or close this down with a really depressing thought. How many years do you think Formula One has got left in it as a racing series?
Oh. Yeah. Um, in its current form, on its current trajectory, a decade,
I
if that.
I think that's probably somewhere about right. So don't get me wrong, Formula One is already using hybrid. They're 1.6 litre V6 turbo hybrid engines. So they're significantly less gas guzzling than the V8s, V10s, and V12s that we had in the 80s and the 90s and beyond.
Yes.
We are having this conversation, you and I, Steve, from the UK, and the current rules in the UK are saying that from the year 2030, there will be a national ban on the sale of brand new petrol and diesel cars. We will move to hybrid, electric, hydrogen, alternative fuels, whatever you want to call them, and that will be it. There will be no more future. Now, that doesn't mean petrol cars will disappear from the road in 2030, because
No, yeah.
it just means you can't buy any new ones. People these days are keeping cars 10, 15, sometimes 20 years, and there's also the classic market, those old classic MGs and Porsche 911s. We're not going to say they have to be electrified, that's bullshit. So there's still going to be some architecture in the country, but bit by bit, you're going to start to see. Whereas your town might have 15, 20, 100 petrol stations, they're going to start becoming fast charge electric spots. They're going to pull the pumps out, they're going to pull the tanks out of the ground, and they're just going to have rows and rows and rows of electric chargers, because that infrastructure for petrol is not going to need to be there anymore. But I digress somewhat. If you think that's what we're about, and Formula One talks about the fact that they are developing tyres, clutches, gearboxes, technology that goes into road cars, that's part of the payoff for these manufacturers.
Yes.
Well, they aren't doing that with petrol V6 turbo hybrids if we're not able to purchase any form of petrol V6 turbo hybrid. So the only future can surely be electrification or alternate fuel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I hate to say it, and I'm sure there'll be people out there that are Greenpeace fans and lovers of the environment that will think I'm an absolute arsehole for saying this, but that is probably where I will lose my love for F1, because I can't get on board with electric racing. It just doesn't do it for me. It doesn't tick the boxes. It's the noise. It's this losing noise, and sound is one of those major senses, like sight and smell and touch. If you go and stand in a Formula One paddock, you smell the fuel, you hear the cars. If they're electric, if you go and stand in a Formula E paddock, you don't smell the fuel and you don't hear the cars, or at least what you hear sounds like your mum's kitchen mixer turning on. It's not a powerful sound, and it loses a huge amount of interest for me.
Well, I think that's proven as well. I mean, the outcry for the engine sound when we changed to what we've got.
Yeah.
And I think that was hammered home even more. Let's rewind. End of last season. Fernando Alonso in his title-winning Renault hammering around that track.
Hmm. Yeah.
And all of the young drivers were on the pit wall videoing that, and when they were asked about it, going, "Oh my god, did it really sound like this?" And it's like, yes, that's the era that you guys have missed out on. You haven't had that. And even Hamilton said, "My god, I wish I had that sound back."
Hmm.
And everyone is asking for it. And even Ross Brawn, who's now the technical advisor for Formula One, has acknowledged it.
Yeah. The only positive about the lack
Yeah.
of sound in the cars has been, I've heard the drivers say they like the fact that they can now hear their engineer and vice versa. But that's the only positive. And
It's the only positive. Yeah.
I'd forgotten about what you were saying about the sound, because I remember the first year they had the turbo hybrids. They tried to fix it mid-season, and basically what they did
Oh,
was they put those really crappy sort of trumpets on the
on
back
the
of the
exhaust.
exhaust. I'd
Yeah,
forgotten all about them. They were horrendous.
and they were investing a lot of money in that,
Yeah.
and none of it helped.
No,
None of it helped.
not
And
one bit.
I mean, like what? Like, okay, so we went with hybrid turbos, but why was the sound so shit? Because that's what baffles me. Because all you could hear is the turbo whirring away, and the electric motor. You just
Mm.
think, well, there should still be a way to do that, and I'm sure with the tech heads in Formula One, there should have been a way to negate that. Because the view, like, people did leave Formula One behind because of it.
Yeah. And
And
people will continue to do so.
oh, they will do, and one that we'll touch on next episode is across the pond, where they're going to have the same issues, and I think I mentioned it to you already. So a little while ago about their plans, which in America is never going to go down well. So yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, I guess let us know in the comments below if those of you watching this have sort of made it all the way through. Let us know what you think the future for Formula One is and
Christ.
where it's going to go.
And if you've made it all through, you deserve a medal because we've been talking a long old while.
We have, and we distinctly moved away from any other form of motorsport straight to F1.
Yes, we did. Yeah, yeah. Apologies if that wasn't what you came here for. We'll maybe try and do something about that. Maybe next time we'll have like no, you can set on YouTube little markers in the timeline, can't you, about when the conversation switches? Maybe we'll do something that says that. It'll probably be 5 minutes BTCC, 5 minutes MotoGP, an hour and a half Formula One.
Well, give the fans what they want.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's. Oh, I guess that's kind of, brought us to a nice end. So yeah, guys, if this is something you want to see more of, you want to voice some opinions you want us to consider, chuck them down below. We're more than happy to, to consider other viewpoints and have a good sort of discussion around those.
Absolutely.
And I think next time as well, we're going to have a bit more to talk about because we're kind of. Is this the last of the triple headers in Formula One?
Ooh.
Because we had France, Austria, and now Austria again. So that is the triple header. And then afterwards, we're also going to have to talk about this new format for the Silverstone Grand Prix. So that's all to come for the next episode. Obviously, the first of the sprint race format for qualifying. So, yeah, a lot to discuss. And we might have a bit of a clearer idea as to where Red Bull Mercedes are going to be as well going into that. So
yeah. And going back to what you were saying about triple headers, it looks to me like we have a triple header between Russia, Turkey, and Japan coming up in October. But something else we should discuss is, of course, the proposed change to the Russian Grand Prix venue, where it will no longer be held at Sochi after this year.
Yeah, I think we need to delve into that because there's some conflicting opinions around that, shall we say?
There is.
We'll have a good chat about tracks as well because there's some other ones I want to pick up on. Guys, I think that's going to round this off for tonight. Well, tonight, wherever you are in this time of the world. Like I say, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more. And we'll have some more discussion around this in the next episode. So for me, that's going to be have a good evening and goodbye. And John, any final words?
Oh, I've got loads of them, but I'll stick with thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed our content, and I hope to see you again next time. Take care.